Are we ready? All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the board meeting. Because this is our first meeting after the March election, this is a board reorganization evening. And so right now I will take a motion for board chair. Russ?
So I'd move to nominate Lynn Johnnick to be board chair.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Here. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor of voting in Lynn Johnnick as board chair, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I see you have it. Congratulations. Lynn, you may come over here and take the empty chair.
I so like this side of the room.
No one is clapping more than I right now.
Yeah, I noticed you didn't even wait to take a breath to second that.
I want to make sure everyone knew.
And while Lynn's getting settled, just want to say for the rest of us, and I'm sure others all agree, thank you so much, Dave, for the leadership that you've provided.
I want to say thank you for everybody who's helped me on this board and made me look better than I really felt like I was doing. I'm not leaving for any other reason than I just have I need to attend to other things and I need some more time. And hopefully someday I'll come back.
You can never leave. I'm living proof of this.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your trust. Big shoes to fill.
Vice chair.
Okay, I will entertain a motion for board vice chair.
I'd make a motion to nominate Colleen McKinnon for vice chair.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Which
Now-
is different than the
What we
clerk of
did.
the district.
Got it. So
Okay.
Dave is
Clerk of the district.
Okay, do we have a nomination for board clerk?
I would like to nominate Kelly, but I didn't check in with Kelly.
Because that's the way I get elected for everything. What is the board clerk versus the clerk of the, I know the clerk of the district role being assistant clerk, but what is the difference?
The clerk of the board is for the, think of it as the secretary for this board.
Yeah.
So we have a note taker here, but if we didn't, that would be your responsibility. You have to sign off on the orders each
Each week?
month.
Oh,
No, you
yeah.
don't go in. That's the clerk, does she? No, that's the clerk of the
I think she
district.
does. I think
She
would,
does.
yeah.
Okay, so you'd need to come in.
Each week, right?
Is it weekly, Jean? It doesn't have to be. Just before the board orders get voted at the meeting.
Okay,
And
just
then-
to sign, but it's not the big notebook, like I don't, I remember going through when Joan wasn't here and did all the clerk work. It's not looking over all those,
The
The
stacks of
bills.
bills.
It's that job, but it's not realistic to actually do that, so the job is more about making sure that the processes that we've established for controls are being followed.
okay. Thank you, I accept. Oh, if someone seconds.
Second.
Any discussion? She accepts. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay,
And we need a vice clerk, just in case.
a nomination for vice clerk. Dave could do that if he was willing, right?
I would volunteer to do that. I've
Okay, never mind.
done this work as,
Would someone like to nominate Jeff to do it? Any discussion? All those in All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And what about the committee appointments? How do we want to do that? I also need the facilities positions.
Oh, right, I'm sorry. So Jean is hoping that we might appoint, I'm thinking, right?
I think.
2 facilities committee reps. For Williston, Kevin Mara, he's not on the board, but we've had precedence of having somebody who's recently on the board serve in that function. And for Shelburne, Dave Connery.
Is this the finance facilities?
No, this is strictly the
specific for
facilities
those- for the
construction.
bond.
Their bonds,
Right.
Okay, so do I have a motion for Kevin Marr to represent Williston, Dave Connery to represent Shelburne? Any second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, and then.
And now your committees.
And now committees. So, 3 committees, we have communications committees, and we have 5 people on the committees?
Well, there are 12 of you, and you've got 3 committees.
Should we approach it from the sense of,
Thank you.
are there any changes that people want to make to the existing committees?
Vacancies
Where
on
are
current ones.
vacancies and things like that.
We have new members.
Right.
Right. Well, and I believe we have vacancies on finance and,
Communications, if Kevin is not.
and negotiations. So 1 on each committee and 2 actually on finance that we have. Is there anyone who wants to change their committee that they're on right
So-
now?
I'm okay to stay, at least right now.
And actually, we have policy as well as those other 3. So we have finance, HR, communications, and policy. So I, you know.
For the new board members, though, the first 3, you need to be on one of those committees, because the way the board is structured, it meets currently, thank you, it meets in this big board meeting, regular business meeting once a month, and once a month it meets in committees, and so everybody is on one of those committees, and will be right here at CVU, mostly, every other Tuesday. So one Tuesday of the month is a committee meeting, focused on the work of that particular committee, and once a month is this big board meeting. Then policy meets during the day at some other time.
And if I could just offer a way to think about this is, you know, we can appoint people now, but part of the work that the board agreed to last February was that we would look at our committee structure and, you know, leading to the retreat, have some work during the retreat specific to that. So it might be at that time in June that some people feel that they want to be on a different committee or a different configuration or something. Does that work for people?
Should this be like one of these reality shows where they audition for the committee heads and we select who we want to have on our?
Red Rover, Red
Yeah.
Rover?
Dodgeball.
So I guess I don't know, this seems like this could be fraught with many different variations.
I agree with Colleen's method, actually, though. I think if we stay the same until at least the retreat in May, and get our new members on committees.
And in the intervening months, you might send out an email to everyone and say, let me know your preferences, so that you have a sense of whether or not you need to tap somebody on the shoulder and said, we're really light on this committee, you know what I mean? To make sure that in the end, we've got somebody on every committee.
Well, and that said, for the new members, you might actually, in the next 2 months, go to the different committees to decide which ones you want to be on, instead of trying to pick one right now. I don't know that there's a small enough committee, or a committee that's too small that it can't get its work
Right.
done. So does that work? Does that work with everyone? Or unless you have a burning desire, and tell me, unless you have a burning desire to be on one? HR. HR, okay. Okay.
That leaves communication, yes.
It's also the negotiating
Yes. That's it.
Some of us run the other direction.
You're right, yeah. I think it's a great idea to try out
Okay.
and see where we fit.
I agree with that. I think that's a terrific idea, if we can take some time to visit these committees and look at the work.
Sure. Okay. That sounds good. All right, so then I think we are set for our committees. We'll move forward through,
Except for policy.
we need one more person, right?
Well, with the policy committee, we had been thinking that it would be, if any new members were interested, that was a great learning opportunity. The committee is meeting in the mornings, and we have one meeting before the end of the year?
Oh, no, we'll have a couple.
Couple meetings,
Yeah.
like
at
8, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. But policy is a great way to figure out what's going on with the board and so forth.
And it doesn't have to be a brand new member, but, you know, The policy committee, as it's constituted for board members, is Colleen, Dave, and myself. And we were hoping that one other person who was relatively new to the board, or brand new, but, that somebody would join as well, for the reasons Colleen mentions, and just to help with the work.
Where do they meet?
Here, at CBU.
CVU?
Yeah, we don't have a schedule for meetings for the balance of the year yet, but we're working on that. And there's a couple of principals that are
So the
on
reason
it
we
as
meet
well.
more is principals is part of the committee.
Okay, yeah.
It's
So-
something to think
Frequented.
about.
Yeah.
If you're interested, I guess,
something I
send me an email, and then, again, all of these meetings are open meetings. So again, you could go to a meeting and see, this is way too much detail, or this is
Yeah.
just what I want to do.
And we were, and Tom, I don't know if you got tapped on the shoulder about student rep on that policy committee as well.
Student rep to the policy board or
Yeah.
committee.
So I think Adam was going to take care of
Okay.
kind of figuring that out, or Mark, or, not me.
Okay, so if you have an interest, let me know, and maybe we can find out when the next scheduled meeting is and get that out to anyone who's interested in going. So, welcome all to our new members, and to the new board. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
One, I'd like to pull out code of ethics from the consent agenda, so that every board member can put their eyeballs on it and understand what it is that they're signing.
Okay.
So we'll add that as an action matter, so it'll become 8.4.
And then,
I'd also like to add to the in the Cole report, a discussion on current
HR.
pending legislation on HR, retirement, and then also education funding. And just to share info from what you know, what some people have read, and apparently some of the information from the VSBA has changed, so we should discuss that.
okay. Any other adjustments? Okay, 4.0, audience and communications. Anyone here to speak to the board about any matter not on the agenda? Okay. Moving right along, presentation, 5.0, classroom culture and climate.
Bless you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Cassandra Townsend. You know many of you. Just for the sake of the audience and you folks, I am the Director of Special Ed at Charlotte Central School and District Director of Computer Systems. And tonight, I have fabulous CBSD educators here who will be sharing a little bit about what they do in their classrooms to build a positive classroom culture. We have Sarah Coda from Charlotte Central School. She's a kindergarten teacher. We have Dan, and I'm not going to say her last name because I might trip it up, first grade teacher at Shelburne Community School, and Michelle Lass at Heinsberg, and first grade as well. All right. Unfortunately, Mary Beth Morrissey is unable to be here tonight. She was planning to represent Williston Central School. She's a third, fourth grade teacher, but I will be subbing for her. So you'll hear a little bit about her classroom experience channeled through me. So, but just to set the context of the series of presentations that all of you have heard this year as our newly consolidated CBSD, we've been really focusing on SEL, sort of social emotional learning, big picture stuff. At the beginning of the year, you saw the movie Resilience, which is that fabulous movie, wonderful research about adverse childhood experiences. Then you also heard from Joelle Van Lent, who spoke about trauma-informed practices and how do we cultivate a trauma-informed classroom and school. And then last time, I was able and had the fortune of speaking with all of you, really highlighting at a district level what are we doing in our district to support social emotional learning, as well as what are the systems that we have in place, what are the vehicles that we have to move that important work forward. So I wanted to start out, we all know teaching, what the goal of teaching is, but this is really where the SEL, classroom management, marries our education and what we teach, the academics. So what we know is that good teaching and classroom management, this is what the research tells us, equals and leads to student achievement. Classroom management encompasses creating a positive classroom environment where students feel comfortable to speak up and learn. They have clear expectations. And what we also know is that behavior problems disrupt learning. We all know that. But engaging learning prevents behavior problems. So our work as educators, and these educators will attest to, focusing on building a positive classroom culture is really key to student achievement. Why does classroom culture matter? All students, all of our individual students, our children, they exist on a continuum. Every continuum is different for every single learner. That's where the personalized learning plans come into play, all of the good work that our district is doing. But the continuum really exists is about learning ability. We all have different learning abilities, learning styles. Our ability to control and self-regulate our behavior. So without that piece, and I've said this before, get on my little soapbox, without that piece, it's really important for our students to attend to math, literacy, those types of things. So that's where this is really, really key. I also talk a lot about relationships, and these folks will talk about relationships as well. A lot of research about relationships, how important the relationships our teachers have with our students, but it's also important the relationships our teachers have with our families and community members. So we always want to keep that in mind. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Coda, who's going to talk a little bit about her experience.
I'm going to give you a little snapshot into kindergarten in respect to their social emotional learning and how we teach them how to take care of themselves, each other's place, thinking about the PBIS model. So kindergarten is really our children's grassroots experience with PBIS, and so it's my responsibility as their first teacher to teach them what it really means to take care of themselves, take care of each other, and to take care of this place. As you can imagine, that's a really big job. So I need to think about what I want to hone in on so that they can grow that learning understanding as they move forward in the schooling years. So my partner Beth and I, she and I choose to really focus on the language of taking care of ourselves, each other's place, and connect it to what it looks like, means like, sounds like, feels like in the classroom. And so we'll actually go back to the other slide. The first thing we do day one right away is teach them the motto. We take care of ourselves. There's not a lot of meaning attached to it yet, but we grow that. We take care of ourselves, we take care of each other, we take care of this place. Would you like to try that?
Yes, yes, we would.
Yes.
Ready? Let's do it together. We take care of ourselves, we take care of each other, and we take care of this place. And that's in service of really growing and understanding and giving the children the ownership of what that really means in a kindergarten world, and then moving forward. Did you think you were going to do that tonight? And so we take time every single day, starting day one, to celebrate what's working. We set goals, so we'll set a goal maybe in the beginning of the year. It's just, this is what whole body listening looks like, and we'll talk about what it looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like, and then we'll really attach it to the why do we do this? Why is this important? How does it help us grow our relationships, and how does it help us grow our learning? And I do a lot of just kind of telling them. And then we're at the point of the year now where I'll ring the chime and I'll ask them to freeze, and I'll say, wow, this is really productive in here. What's happening? What does it look like? And a kiddo will share out. And what does it sound like? And then they start to really own it, and it becomes their language. And if there's a problem, they use the same language to solve it. So it's a positive solution. Like, I was really having a hard time getting my work done. I wonder if we worked a little harder to sit belly to the table and to give our friends friendly reminders to turn their sounds off. If we get our work done, let's give it a try. And then they try it and they do it. And at this point of the year, it's just humming because they believe it. They know what it means to take care of themselves, each other in this place. And these are quotes out of their mouths, and I think they speak for themselves. I take care of myself by trying hard and looking at the alphabet chart for help. feels good to solve writing problems by myself. That was a child talking about feeling really stuck during writer's workshop, and the lesson before, or the goal before, was to, what do writers do to solve their own problems, and how can we help our peers if they're stuck? 5-year-olds want to do it for them and help them, and we talked about why that's not the gift you want to give to your kid. You want to give it to your friend. You want to give them their think time, their problem-solving time. The middle one, Skylar, age 5. I liked how everyone was quiet when we took our own turns. That helped me do my thinking job. Also, that's how I know my friends care about my brain. We can all do things to help each other learn, and so on and so forth. So, right now we just weave that language into everything we do and watch it go out onto the playground and go into music class. And the hope is that it becomes a common language that's sustainable and really meaningful, and that the children own it, and really hopefully one day take it out to the bigger world, because that's what we want for our kids, how to take care of themselves, each other, and this bigger world. Thank you, Sarah. All right, Michelle.
Okay, so in first grade, literacy is really an important part of what we do. And so our core concepts in Heinsberg are belonging, sharing, trust, accepting responsibility, and respect. And those are really big concepts, but they're really important to making our classroom and our school run smoothly. So we read about and then do some sort of an activity, whether it's a role play or a craft, to help kids understand what that means. Here we grew our own respect garden. We read about respect, and then we talked about what that might sound like in our classroom. So kids wrote things like tell the truth, say you're sorry, smile, say hello. These are ways that you can show respect to your peers. We created a comic strip that went down along the wall a long ways, and when we talked about belonging, we show belonging when we talk to each other. You can do it. Can you play with me? Hi. Can I help you? Would you like to play with me today? So that they understand what it is that they're supposed to do, how it sounds like. If they've never been taught those skills explicitly, they learn them here. This was a display that was for them before school started that showed that they all belong. We all belong to the same box of crayons. And then this is the rainbow fish. It's a very popular children's book, and in the book, the fish learns to share. And so they all drew a picture of something that they'd be able to share with their peers. It's something that we do heavily at the start of the year, but we revisit it all year long. It's really important that you don't just teach it once, assume they've learned it, and go on from there. We practice and practice and practice throughout the year. We can revisit these because they still hang in our classroom. Positive, trusting relationships make our classroom productive, safe, and fun. It should be fun, too. And how do we make that happen? Every day we greet students. I greet them as they come into the room. Oh, how's that loose tooth? How's that new puppy? Did he chew another shoe? I make sure that they know that I want to see them. I'm glad that they're there. And they share with me all of those important events in their lives. Bursting news. Every week, a child has a day that is their specific share day. But sometimes share doesn't happen on that day. So if they've got bursting news, we have a bursting news segment of the day, and they can share, our puppy got lost, but we found him, or house fires, lots of, really first grade things and some really big things. And then we spend time working through those feelings and emotions. We set the expectations from day one. And they're reinforced and practiced and reminded throughout. And much like Sarah said, at this point in the year, they're reminding each other. Remember, when we sit on the rug, you have to sit so I can see too. You have to explicitly teach children how and what to do and when to do it. And sometimes kids need more reminders than others. We work really hard. When she was talking about those two pieces, they have to have rigorous work. If it's not meaningful and it's not rigorous, they don't have a purpose. But we also play really hard, purposeful play. We laugh a lot. Sometimes we cry. I read a story that made us all cry a little at the end. But we have all of those feelings. I share myself with my students as much as it makes sense. If I have a flat tire on the way to school, if we have a new grandbaby in the family, sometimes they're big things and sometimes they're little things. It's like, oh, this morning I spilled toothpaste on my shirt and I had to change my shirt and that's why I was late today. And they share those things and I share back. I'm really honest with them. When kids come in and ask you, what happens when somebody dies? Because their family is in the throes of a traumatic experience and the adults in their lives are too hurt to be able to have that conversation with them. I often end up having those conversations. We didn't actually lose Grandma. She's not coming back. I communicate with parents frequently, daily for some. When things come up, we had cupcakes for her birthday, and she had frosting all over, so I sent her birthday girl photo to Mom. When things aren't going well, the parents need to know about it immediately. You don't wait a few days or until the next event. We share and problem solve together. It makes us part of a team that works toward a successful school experience for their child. I included a slide that is a recent SEL lesson that we did in our classroom. We were working on emotions. And while this one is, how are you feeling today? And it has, this says happy, sad, angry, scared, and embarrassed. And there are photos of students in the classroom with those expressions. We talked about how faces look and the difference in the way a face looks. And if somebody has this face, how do you approach them? What do you say? And if someone has this face, how do you approach them and what do you say? We listed a number of different words that might mean the same thing as happy. A lot of young children come to school with all of the ad words. How do you feel? Bad, sad, mad, glad. But we expanded to joyful, happy, hopeful, playful, sad, unhappy, ignored, miserable, glum. And we give them more language. So when a child has a facial expression, I can say, oh my gosh, Ray, you look like you're a little glum today. Do you want to talk about what's happening? And then we share that moment as well. This is just one of a series of conversations that we have throughout the course of the year. This happened to be where we were at. They wanted you to see their faces, so I shared that one with you today. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm Mary Beth. Just kidding.
Ish.
Ish. So Mary Beth is an amazing educator at Williston Central School, 3rd and 4th grades. In her classroom, if she were here, she would talk about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. This is something as educators we're really working on developing sort of this optimism around our own learning ability. Fixed mindset is really the understanding that I'm closed off, or not closed off, but my intelligence that's it. I can't go beyond that. I'm kind of fixed. I'm worried of doing anything else. So growth mindset is we're really trying to foster in our children, in our schools, this ability to think bigger, think outside of what maybe you think about your own learning ability. It's really important to think about that. In her classroom, this is the Yeti, she explained to me, and this is a symbol, it's her classroom mascot, and they use it as a reminder of the word yet. So oftentimes when we're learning, we get stuck in a I can't do it mentality. Our children do that. That's human nature. Sometimes adults do it too. But in Mary Beth's classroom, she's very thoughtful and mindful about facilitating this growth mindset by thinking about the word yet. So instead of saying, I can't do it, which many students feel down, they feel frustrated, especially when they're learning something new. She is wonderful at teaching the children to say, I can't do it yet, but I'm going to get there. So that's how she's building a positive classroom culture. Go Noodle is also a really fun activity. Have you all used that for dancing and movement breaks? So again, learning has to be fun, as Michelle had mentioned. And so one of the ways that we have fun in school is to move. And Go Noodle is a great program. It's online where you can offer students very brief 5-10-minute breaks throughout their day for them to move and dance, because there's a lot of research out there that also shows the importance of being active for our brain development, for our attention in class, and so she does a lot of those as well. At Williston, they're also implementing PBIS. SAFE, their school-wide expectations are safe, mindful, accepting, respectful, and truthful. She wanted me to share this. This is a question that she ended up asking her students in her classroom. What does a positive classroom culture feel like? Many of the students reported everyone matters, you have fun and learn. She really wanted me to point out these two. People notice you and listen to you. That's huge. It also goes with, it doesn't feel like you are invisible. So how do we make our students visible when they don't feel visible in the classroom? That's where all of this building a positive classroom culture is critically important. How can adults create a positive classroom culture? These are the voices of her students. Welcome students in the morning. Help kids not be alone. Don't focus on mistakes. Give tips about how to do it better instead. I love that one. That's a great one. Have a good time with your students. Have a positive attitude. All right, Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan Tomeo, first grade teacher at Shelburne Community School. We do focus a lot as well on our growth mindset, as Mary Beth had highlighted in her slide, talking about how some people come in with this disposition that our mental ability is fixed so that we can't learn anything else. So we try and change that in the beginning of the year with a lot of social thinking. We have a lot of wealth and resources at our school with books through classrooms and asking teachers, do you have some great books that kind of promote some self-thinking or stretching your imagination or questions like what do you do with a problem? How can you work with an idea? And through a generous grant through the Shelburne PTO, we were able to purchase more books and provide it not only for first grade but for the entire school. So we would always ask questions instead of saying some things like, I give up. Our phrase for growth mindset instead would be, I'll use some strategies I've learned. Instead of saying I made mistakes help me improve. That's like the popular one in our classroom. When somebody makes a mistake, you'll hear 5 other first graders say, oh, mistakes are okay. They help you improve and help you get better in your learning. We do a lot of motivational whiteboard messages. Today we did, I think it was Super Tuesday, and excuse me, when we do our morning meeting in the morning as a part of Responsive Classroom, a lot of the time when we do a share out with a whole group or partner share, it's to build on our social emotional learning. So they're very focused questions, intentional questions. And I said, how can you be a superhero today? And it's not like, oh, I can teleport or I can see through walls. The question was, how can you be a superhero in your learning today? So we had kids brainstorm, how can you use superpowers to improve upon your learning? So then kids had the opportunity to come up with their own super names. So we saw some like Super Math Boy, Super Learning Girl, Fantastic Focuser. So they really owned up to their talking, and at the end of the day, we always come back to doing a reflection, and they were just like kind of proud in this ownership that I was a superhero, and I'm like, go fly around with your cape today and try these new things. At the end of our days too, we try to always get to it, asking our students, did you make a positive impact on a peer today, in the classroom, outside at recess, at lunch, wherever, or a friend? And we have students trying to think intrinsically throughout the day and just reflecting over and over again, because that's what's so important about learning, is reflecting and thinking about what works, what doesn't work. Did you try something new? So I have kids be honest with your work. And we want them to be thinking honestly, because if we're not thinking honestly, then we're not improving on our learning. We want to be reflecting as genuine as possible. What did you do? And I like to share some out and have kids leave them blank so they're very anonymous. And then be honest, if they didn't find themselves doing anything positive with a peer, or if they forgot, I like them to try and reflect and say, what can you try and do tomorrow as a learner? Just thinking of some things that happen in our classroom to kind of promote relationships and positivity. Students are welcomed every morning with our morning meeting, setting a positive tone for the day, doing a greeting, making it fun, interactive, asking students what kind of greeting they want to do, making the sharing very genuine. A lot of questions around creating a positive environment, a positive classroom community, and a school community. Doing a fun team building activity, working on problems or just having fun, making things academic as well. And setting a positive tone for the day and ending kind of with a message, giving kids the heads up of what's going to be coming out through the day. No surprises, kind of lower the stress and anxiety in the room. Establishing a sense of significance, belonging, and encourage students to just generally have fun in their classroom. As a teacher in my room, I really feel powerful about promoting positive reinforcing, using teacher language to recognize student accomplishments and contributions, saying, hey, because you tried new strategies on that word today, you were able to progress in your reading a little bit further. And it's just great to see their smile on their face and go, oh yeah, I did do that today. So just taking the time to work really hard to acknowledge all the student accomplishments. Like we said, conversations about growth mindset happen organically among students. And then doing restorative circles or friendship circles to end our day, and doing a round of how are you doing today, and then asking deeper questions. What are your worries? Just getting students to think about how we can be reflecting as learners and making everybody feel a sense of belonging, and trying to get students to open up to each other. These are just some quotes for some students, asking them questions about positivity in the classroom. We make our classroom a safe place by picking up pencils and materials off the floor, even when we didn't make the mess. We also organize the booths in the hallways so people can walk safely. It's really great, like during a quiet time after lunch and recess. It's been a busy morning, and then we have a long block of time for academics in the afternoon. So we always come back and kind of hit the reset button and do a quiet time where kids have about 10 minutes on their own to read, write, or draw, or just sit quietly just to get ready. And there's a group of some students who go out into our hallway, and the booths are always a mess, of course, after recess. And they take the time to organize about 40 pairs of boots. And I was like, look what I did. And I'm like, wow, because you organized them, our hallway's safe. It looks neat. It looks like a store. I want to go buy these boots. I'm like, did you have an adult do this? Are you sure? So they're just really proud of the actions they're taking within the community. We can check on friends who are feeling sad by showing empathy. That was a big piece of the beginning of the year, is learning about empathy and how we can show kindness to others and putting ourselves in another person's shoes. I see students trying their hardest to read and try new strategies. That shows a growth mindset. It's great to see students, first graders in the classroom, noticing what other classmates are doing as well. And then in morning meeting, at greeting, we show kindness when we say, I'm glad you're here today, and we can show that we care by making eye contact. And we're always talking about how can we promote good, positive body language and showing each other that they're part of our group, welcoming them in. One thing I had left off is about parent communication. I'm always welcoming parents into our morning meeting, giving them the opportunity to come and spend some time in our classroom, read a book, just keeping them involved and opening up lines of communication really shows that they're part of their students' learning as much as the teachers, and we want everyone to be involved.
Thank you, Dan. So this is, I have to do a flow chart. So this is really thinking about the work that we do, that all of these folks have shared. It's really based on evidence-based practices, just like it would be for math, literacy. So we think about what are the best practices out there, and then how can we really think about what are our individual school cultures, our school population, what do our students need to be the best learners that they can be. And so we're working a lot in terms of classroom management in general, but really, as these folks have attested to, the best classroom management is really engaged lesson plans and learning. So really making your learning environment a positive place where people feel safe and comfortable to learn. And so that's it. Questions?
I have some bursting news.
Burst away.
So I love it when, we have these teachers in our schools and you guys come in and then I love when I see you guys out of the classroom in the community. So I just want to recognize Dan for working on the ice last night at the Vermont State Championship. Did you do both games or just the Division I?
Just the Division I game.
Yeah, that was a great game, and my son spotted you from a really long ways away, wearing a helmet, and was like, I think that's my book buddy's teacher. So it was really cool to have him make that connection and to see a great game and to see out with the best seat on the ice to watch a game. But the other thing I wanted to ask is, for each one of you, I think it would change for kindergarten and then up into first grade. What happens, what's the system for when you introduce change into the system when a new kid shows up? I was talking about this with a coworker today who had moved 4 times between between 4th and 8th grade. And what are some of the things you do to ingrain the system into a new kid, and what are the systems you have for the kids that are there to welcome that new person in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I really answer this through a kindergarten lens. It really depends what time of the year, of course. But but it actually can happen pretty organically because of how this works and what we believe that kids need to be constantly revisiting and practicing the learning around this work. But if it were to happen today or tomorrow, I guess, in the classroom, I think the children could really lead by example, and that would probably be my messaging to the class that was already, you know, a community, that the best thing we can do first is to lead by example. So if you're doing it, and then I can bring the chime and say, help that friend, that new person join in by just matching up, that would be one piece. And then kind of rethinking what is most important and grow it from there. But I think the kids would really embrace the opportunity to kind of help that kid find his or her way quickly and be a member of the community. So I think that's exciting to think about.
I think it's also really important, I didn't really say this exactly, but I think that it's really important for kids to understand that there's a routine to your school day and really the flow of a week and the year. But I also try to make sure that as often as I can, I let them know about changes in their schedule, because that's more upsetting to a first grader or kindergartner than or second grade than you might think. Just a change or you know, a fire drill it can be. And so when we're allowed to let them know that those things are happening, I'll say, or if I'm going to be out, like, don't forget on Thursday I'm going to have a doctor's appointment, and then on Tuesday, don't forget on Thursday I have a doctor's appointment, I'm going to be out. So if you have a change, and that's a pretty significant change because it changes the feel of your classroom family, you let them know, like, oh gosh, we have a new friend joining us. And then, like that slide, it's like, gosh, you know, how do you think that person is going to be feeling? You know, how do you feel about having a new person in your classroom? And really sort of talking through what is sort of like a family change for your classroom. And then once that student arrives, then that other piece sort of takes over, and they can sort of organically fold in. And if you're far enough into the year and you feel successful in the job that you've done, they're able to just, you know, come play with me. You know, let's do this. And sometimes you have more helpers than you need, which is the sort of the best, worst problem you can have.
And I guess the gift, if we're doing this well enough or well, is that it already feels like a safe environment. So that student coming in, who knows what his or her circumstances are, but on the foundation, there's that feeling of, oh, this is a safe place, and these are my people, and they're going to help me figure it out. I just feel like that's the best first step. If we teach the other kids that, they would embrace the situation.
I mean, what's being said, talking about safe places, and I also constantly talk about, we have a classroom community, a school community, and a community is a place where people share the space. So I'm always inviting educators, guests into our classroom, students from upper grades, just to come in and just constantly a different flow in the classrooms. Like, all these people are coming, how can we welcome them in? How can we treat them with respect and show them that we're caring about them? And then when the person does come in, we know we're getting a new student, having that conversation, how do you think that person feels, and have them have the open dialogue and get some ideas flowing. So now that they're coming, we have ideas, how can we treat them? How can we show them that they're going to be a part of our classroom now?
Well, it's a front loading, everything we do.
I can learn all this.
Look at that one, we don't have an answer for.
I mean, a little bit, I think it's in all of our hearts since day one. That's why we chose this profession, for sure. But that being said, it takes a lot of practice and opportunities to be embedded in really good professional development that you all provide for us, so.
I was going to say, all those courses and trainings
Yeah.
and all those, you know, we saw the picture of Joelle Van Lent. She came in, I don't know what she cost us, but she was worth every cent and more so. We've had mindfulness training. There's been responsive classroom trainings for folks. We've had lots of opportunities, and every time, some of the trainings I would do again, because every time you go through one of those trainings, there's another piece that starts to live inside you, and it grows, and you nurture it, and hopefully it.
And honestly, having a tomorrow as a teacher, because you can always do things a little different and better, and those questions come to you, or those situations come, and they're not always expected, so giving it everything you got, and then have something to reflect with, a team to reflect with, or an opportunity to do it again, the same or better or totally different the next day, is one of the best and most challenging things about our profession.
I did. First, I just want to recognize that it's great programming for K-4. It's really strong, and I love the way it's such a coordinated, it seems like a coordinated effort across the district and individually in the schools of taking kids that sometimes don't have that social emotional learning structure. It's really their first experience with social environments. So I want to recognize that. But my question really is then, for sort of the part two of it, So the preschool, adolescents, like 5, 8, does the program, there's such a concentration on K4 for social behavior, social structure, kindness, like you said. Then 5, 8, as the kids start to develop, mature, become a little more pushy individual, notice each other's differences, what's the structure to sort of preserve that kindness in the classroom? Or is it, or do we have it? Is that a focus that we need?
That's a great question, and I can speak from experience at Charlotte Central School with the introduction of the advisory model through the responsive classroom developmental design. Really building the social communities, having smaller communities within our larger grade band communities is really critical. We do tend to, put a lot of emphasis on the early grades as you identified. That's because what the research tells us is early intervention, as you already mentioned, is essential. That doesn't mean it stops at grade 4. We have to look at our students' needs, and not just individual student needs, but cohort needs. What are the needs of our 6th grade students, right? Because the peers influence each other as well. So that's really important. So how do we build those communities? I would also add that student voice becomes key in terms of being part of the programming or the road shows. We often call them road shows at Charlotte. How do we get the older students to teach taking care of ourselves, taking care of others, taking care of our school, this place, to the younger? So again, how do we build that expertise in our older students and give them opportunities to practice and role model and be part of that work? Because it just doesn't stop there. It can't.
I don't think that it does stop. I think that it takes on a different look. I mean, all of those cute things wouldn't be quite so cute in a 6th grade. That's why Responsive Classroom has a younger model and an older model, and it looks a lot different. I can't honestly say that I can speak to how that looks in the older grades, other than I know that the PBIS core values that I shared on my slide travel throughout their entire building, and how they teach and reinforce those in the upper grades looks differently than it does in my classroom, but it is something that our administration asks us to address and reinforce and practice with our students. And maybe we were the only ones who were willing to come and stand in front of all of you and talk about it.
I have the same question as Kelly, but
It's fine.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Moving on to 6.0, report to the board. 6.1 is committees, communication, community connections.
Yes, so last month we did not have a communication committee meeting because I had a St. George Town meeting on the same night that I actually spoke on behalf of the board to the town of St. George at that meeting. They still honor spot for the school board at the town meeting, which I thought was pretty nice. This month also, the board letter to the press, we opened up our space to Elaine for her superintendent's letter on school safety. So we were able to pull that together and get that done. And so I think that's, oh, and the communications, I can announce that we spent a great deal of time on the board resolution that was discussed last month, sort of introduced, but then there was, for those new people, I had presented a letter, well, actually a resolution that was passed in nearby Addison County School District about prevention, gun violence prevention. You'll see it in the packet. It was, at that meeting, it was discussed that it really wasn't the right time for it and that there should be further discussion. There was a discussion period where folks sent Dave and myself comments. I was able to incorporate some of those comments. The draft you're seeing now has our board comments on it, and that's part of the work we did with communications this month.
Finance did meet, and I think we included in our budget packet kind of the topics and went through what we talked about. We did a quick review again of the second quarter FMR. And then the facilities update was something that probably we didn't talk about at the last meeting here, and it was included in your packet. That's the most up-to-date plan for facilities for the next few years, but it's still open to review and change. And that should have been included in the packet. We also did an asset and liability review, which was fascinating, which was done when we consolidated, or the consolidation committee did it. And Jean thought that was a good thing for us to continue to do. So we also included that in the packet, if anyone has any questions about that. We also did our own little budget debrief, which you can see our highlights. We're going to have further on in this meeting, we're going to have a full budget debrief, so I don't want to, set you up for anything different. But this was kind of more how our committee worked and how we felt it worked within our committee. This was our feedback. And then we jumped the gun a little bit on the committee review. And so we kind of took a look at how did our committee work? Would we want to add additional people to our committee? We looked at having a separate standalone facilities committee. And for now, I think we've decided that how it's kind of set up when there's a big bond, like in Williston or Shelburne, we'll have those ad hoc committees with specific administration and community members to those towns. And whenever we get into the food service realm, there probably will be an additional committee for that. So that was communicate or finance. Did you want to? Anyone have any questions or want to add?
Thank you for the level of detail you provided.
Welcome. HR and labor.
So we met and discussed a number of things, one of which was there were actually 3 committees agreed to in the last round of, in the last contract with the teachers. Mark is working on scheduling, getting those meetings scheduled because the next round of negotiations isn't really all that far off. We would expect to start that sometime in the fall. Another topic regarding the next round of negotiations, we discussed whether we would want to rehire Pietro Lynn. We've always had, somebody, a professional helping us or, kind of assisting us with the negotiations. Our feeling was that we would want to, and we'll be reaching out to him to see if he's available and wants to represent us again. We think we're nice people, so hopefully he'll say yes on that. Couple of different topics on leadership development, and we hope that this will become part of the retreat agenda, some further discussion on that. How do we identify and develop future leaders within our school district who can become principals and directors of special ed and superintendents even someday. So we feel that we want to try to get some good conversation going on that and get some kind of get a process or a plan in place to be able to do more of that. And then finally, a number of years ago, we put in place a kind of a management compensation system, if you will, that helped us identify, okay, how are we paying our leaders and our administrators? How does that compare to, kind of our peers around Chittenden County and whoever we might consider our peer group? It's been updated once, I believe, and we felt that it was time to have that updated again. And it really helps to make sure that we're paying our people fairly and that we're competitive in this marketplace, so that when it does come time to hire new people, that we're not at a disadvantage there. So that's where we are with HR, and we are down to kind of 2 1/4 members on the HR committee. Well, in terms of timing, in terms of how long. So yes, we need another person or two to join our committee. It's Colleen, Amanda, and myself, but may not be that way.
And I wanted to add here, I had updated the HR
our committee about a particular benefit, the healthcare benefit for teachers here, well, for the entire staff. For new folks, in January, we were required to roll out new healthcare plans for all employees of our schools, and that has not gone very smoothly. And the reason for that is a company called Future Planning Associates, and they are our third-party administrator. They stand between our employees and the insurance company and the doctors, and they're supposed to process claims and make sure everything gets paid on time and correctly. And the truth is, they have not done that, and have not done that well at all. In fact, I think they failed miserably. And they think that too. So what they have done is canceled their contracts with all the districts across the state and are pulling out of the business altogether. That is to occur as of May 31st. This is a big deal. I would say we have some teachers here in the audience and administrators sitting around the table. I would say 75% of us have something going on with our healthcare that is not being paid correctly, and bills are coming in that should have been paid already. Luckily, we have a group called VHI, who's the state level education health providers, who have worked tirelessly to find a replacement for future planning, and believe they have done so in such a way that it will be of minimal inconvenience to our employees, and will begin to fix things hopefully sooner, in fact, sooner than May 31st. We're hoping that we will go with them by May 1st, and that claims will start being processed even after we sign our contracts before May 1st. So we're hoping there's a catch-up coming. I'm bringing this, and I very rarely would bring benefit news to the board, but this has been in the news. It was on Vermont Digger. WCAX did a story. It affects a lot of education employees, not just in our district, but across the state. So I just thought it should be something you should be aware of. If you have any questions, shoot me an email or something, and I can explain it further.
Did everyone get the email from VI, or was it just?
I have sent that. I have updated. So there was 2 emails that came from VI. I provided one of them to all the employees. The one I think you got was a little more technical, but just kind of explaining where we were.
I was just curious, like, did I only get that because I was a chair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
but
I
then
can
I
share that to everyone else.
Yeah, I copied that and sent that out to all employees.
Okay. I'll share it to everyone here, because I guess, are you confident that the new provider can pick it up? Because I felt like there was a leap of faith in that language where these guys are doing part of this job, so can we handle
So
the rest of
since that email came out, VHI has vetted them further. So I can share this. We know future planning, part of their process is manual, where somebody's picking up a bill, comparing it to something else, and going on. I can't tell you exactly which part, but I really don't care. DataPath does everything electronically. Most of these third-party administrators do everything electronically. That seems to be part of the backup. Future Planning was not staffed up to do the amount of claims that they got. DataPath is a much larger company. They already handle companies with much larger size than us. So as much as we can be sure, they've been vetted. So yes, we're confident. Yes.
So you'd mentioned that DataPath provides a platform, or had been providing a platform to Future Planning Associates that can take up the whole thing. So are they essentially in 2 lines of business, or that they will sell their internal platform to other
They have an
providers?
administrator side business. yeah.
Okay, but then they also do where they're, kind of fully integrated and do that whole thing from soup to nuts?
Yeah, you can look them up. They operate out of Arkansas. They operate out of Arkansas. They handle, I think it was Arkansas state employees, so a very large section. But yeah, so that's what we do. And VHI, Laura Soares, who you on the board have seen give presentations to us, has sort of been taking point on this and has talked to them and interviewed them, and as much as we can be sure, we're sure that they can take on the business.
And the bottom line, too, from a money perspective, is 60% that we budgeted for is still
the
That still
data
seems to be a good estimate, and DataPath has agreed to, third-party administrators, they charge us a fee to do this, and they've agreed to not raise that price any from future plannings. For now, right, come January, maybe.
How long is the contract that we would be signing with them now?
So the initial contract would be from now till January.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, January is just a natural, that's when everybody open enrollment, blah, blah, blah.
So I assume there was errors that identified that they were doing a less than adequate job. What is going to be the look back of claims with this new company?
So the new company has agreed to clean up claims that are still outstanding. Is this what you're asking?
Well, claims that were submitted and processed by the.
So we know that future planning is about a month behind in processing claims. We expect DataPath will pick up, once everybody kind of signs on, we'll kind of step in and start cleaning that up. We'll start cleaning up the backlog.
So are you confident that all the claims that went through the current vendor went through accurately?
No. But we will do, DataPath is, in part of the process will be to start cleaning, if there's still errors, to start cleaning them up. We have started to keep a record here. We have opened up a new email account to all employees where they can send problems that they're having with future planning. We're keeping a record. And truthfully, other than keeping a record and being able to supply that to DataPath when they come on board and saying, this is what we know, we will have to then keep reminding employees to send us problems if they're having.
Is there going to be, I think what you're getting at, Brenda, is there going to be any like rechecking, double checking verification of what's been processed?
I'm not entirely sure that they'll go back to January, but I can check that out for you. Yeah.
So does the ownership really go on the employee to make sure they're doing their due diligence of their claims? Is that what this is? Like, if there was a claim that was processed incorrectly, unless the employee themselves realizes, then?
So what we're talking about is whether they're paying more than they should.
Right.
So if they go over their first out-of-pocket expense,
Mhm.
$250 for a family, yes, they should be paying attention. Right now, we're telling them not to pay their bills.
Yeah.
We're telling them to wait until the new company picks this up. Because then, yes, that processing will go through again as bills get put through again.
But I think that some of the onus being on the employees to make sure that things are working properly has always been part of, the thing with HSAs and HRAs.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
But not to this degree.
No,
So
right.
Yes, no question about it, but that has always been part of the,
Right.
the theory or the deal behind the HRA.
And I imagine you're sending just communications out, letting those employees know that just register your claim, like pay attention to your claims.
That's all
Yeah,
he's been
and
doing.
we have started,
I bet.
just last week, we went out to the Heinsberg School and had a presentation with the teachers about how the healthcare is supposed to be working.
Right.
And that there are problems.
Right, yeah.
We're going out to the high school in a week.
It's a nightmare.
And we're gonna go to each of the schools, do the
Mhm.
same thing.
Thank you.
So, my staff has been buried with this, so they're, yeah.
We put this on a future agenda just for a follow-up to see.
I will promise to update you, yes.
Okay, cool report. A couple announcements. One, notice that we have the National Secondary Schools Vermont Principal of the Year here, so I think we ought to recognize Alan. And Jean has an announcement.
Yes, we have a new finance director. Her name is Jordan Nalay, CPA. We stole her from the CCTA, where she's the controller. She spent a lot of time doing audit work before that. So she's got all the requirements that we could hope for. So very excited to have her join us in about 4 weeks.
And transportation, your favorite thing.
What? Oh, because it's buses, exactly. I have to give her my bus duties now. Oh, yeah.
That's great.
It was all subliminal. It was all
Twofer,
subliminal. I'd never give up the bus thing, there's no way.
Jeff, might you update the board? I know it's in the report, but just a quick summary of what's going on with.
Sure. Yes, it is in the report. We have our first integrated field review coming up next school year. It's the state's new accountability system, and it'll be the first time we've experienced it. And anybody who's been on the high school board knows that we used to have something called NEASC. This is now the Vermont version of that, but now it's for the entire system. So it's the whole K-12 system. We have a design team and lead who will be working on building the team that will be representing CVSD, members from each school, and we will be working with 2 other schools in the region. We will have a visiting team that'll go to those schools and serve as feedback platforms, and then those schools will come to us. So we'll keep you posted on what that looks like as the time frame gets closer.
Do you know, is there a board role in that? Is there a board member part of the group?
I haven't heard yet exactly what the construction of the team needs to be, but we're having a webinar soon where they're going to share all that detail.
Since Russ nominated everyone, we should make sure that he gets the opportunity.
While he's eating his cookie.
Did we want to,
The other thing we wanted to
The
talk about was sort of a legislative update. I know, I could
Yeah.
maybe start.
Yeah, go ahead.
go for it.
There's just a lot going on in the legislature right now with education funding. And I sent a note to Kate Webb. My biggest pet peeve with the legislature is retroactive changes to our budgets. So I've been on her about that, and in that conversation, she mentioned that she had spoken to you a little bit. She was open to texting her on the floor today and tomorrow. And if anybody wants to, has any ideas for her, I'd be glad to share her number. But just, I really want to get board members' feelings and understandings and exposure of these changes, and any insight that you have, because it's changing so quickly. That's what I was thinking.
Now, I know Lynn and a few other people have been on top of this as well, but my understanding of what's happening with the ed funding is there's a couple of pieces. The one which shouldn't really affect us too much is that they're, rather than the general fund giving money to the ed fund, they've decided, at some percentage, and that number can be changed by the legislature. They've said, let's just separate them, so we're gonna have, for instance, the sales tax is gonna go to the ed fund now, but there'll be no general transfer. So they've done this puts and takes. We're gonna take some of these uses of money and put them back in the general fund where they belong. We're gonna take some of these sources of money and dedicate them to the education fund and just sort of draw a bright line. So that shouldn't, it all comes out in the wash, so that is interesting and confusing, but maybe not urgent for us to worry about, I don't think, unless anybody's read something different. The other part, politically, they're between a rock and a hard place, given that even with really fiscally conservative budgets, the property tax is scheduled to go up quite a bit. And that's unpalatable to most people in the state. And so one thing they're looking at is coming up with a new source of funds. So they're talking about a income tax surcharge, which will raise about $59 million, which is money that will not have to be raised on the property tax. So the property tax, everyone's property tax bill who pays on property tax is going down about $15. It's about 15 cents, 15 cents. Again, that's lined up to raise about the same amount of money, just in different left pocket, right pocket, I think.
Right.
Within that, though, they're changing the way that they're doing the formula, and the one thing that will affect us is the way that the formula works is that moving forward, because of the base amount that they're changing the base amount, future increases. It used to be that if your budgets went up 2.5%, then the tax rate would go up 2.5%. It's now set up so that and I have to show you the math, but a 2.5% increase on the tax rate is gonna make the tax rate go up like 5 or 6%. It's just the way the math works. So there's gonna be a lot more, it's gonna be a lot more sensitive. That's not getting a lot of press. That will be something that will be a problem for us. The third thing, just that we were kicking around a lot of emails, is that they're shifting part of the cost of teacher retirement to, it's definitely to the ed fund. It's already in the ed fund, it just hasn't been on our budgets before. And so now I think what they're saying, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I've lost track of this part, is that there's about $800 for each teacher who's in the retirement pool that has to be paid every year, and that they would ask it to be in our budget, is my understanding, which is about $350,000 budget increase, just like that.
Starting
2020.
in 2020.
So we have another year.
With everything.
Yeah.
That's not an.
On top of the transfer, there's $50 million less than approximately.
Well, I think that's what they're picking up.
This year to last year.
Are you talking about the hole in the funding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think, like over the next year or two, there are a number of places we're going to be hit big, if that were to happen.
Well, I think that's the switch with the income tax. I think they're taking care of it there.
Well, the one-time money that we had last year is gone.
Right, and so that's why if you didn't do this income tax, property tax swizzle, the tax rates we had to sell to our constituents, right, was that the tax rates are gonna go up by these 8% numbers. And that was in order to refill that $50 million that they use one-time money for.
Oh.
So instead of doing that, what they look to be moving pretty quickly on right now is to put an income tax surcharge on, take the property tax down, but raise that, in the swizzle, raise that $50,000 so that they can fill that back up.
So what is a surcharge?
It depends on your.
As opposed to just calling it higher income tax rates.
Because I think it comes out, I think it's like a withholding. I don't think you actually pay it on your, I think it's a withholding that the employers do. That was the last that I understood of it. Because you weren't going to be penalized if you underpaid in this first year, since they're talking about this being retroactive to January 1st of this year.
Spin on that one is.
Still, I gotta say, still an
a
income
tough.
tax.
Yeah,
And,
it is.
Well,
I guess my question, because the governor has said basically no new taxes, this is a new tax.
Well, he's still looking, if you listen, he was on Vermont Edition on Friday, he is still looking for additional spending cuts on top of just the spending.
$40 million,
cut.
I believe was.
But the one piece that we pushed around, and you pushed back on Kate, and I reached out to Mike Yantachka, my rep, was on the incentives, because that was the unclear piece. What happens to the 10.8642 under Act 46? And we know for sure the 8 cents at least is safe for this year. There's nothing that says those incentives are going away.
So Kate came back to me and said that the 642 is not changing.
Right.
But what was changing was, I don't know what this is, there's like a new program for folks who didn't consolidate by this year. There's the 5% funnel or something like
Their
that?
tax rate, when they were forced to consolidate, their tax rate couldn't increase 5%. It happened
Yeah,
when
we had the same thing
when
for
we were
us too. Yeah,
consolidating
I think,
too. I think that's the
I
incentive.
think
they were
Charlotte
talking
might have,
about.
or somebody was protected, but for 1 year. But it didn't affect us because we've moved past that hold harmless part.
But that was the third thing that she mentioned in the last email I sent.
But it doesn't affect us.
But okay, doesn't affect us, but, all right. But she said to me the 642 is
It's
definitely
safe.
in there. We will still get that. Because
Yeah.
I just feel like if they took that away.
That would be
Oh, yeah,
ridiculous.
That would be like,
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
the British were coming.
Yeah.
We'd be throwing tea into Lake Champlain.
Well, and I asked Mike, and I think you also asked Kate, if they would consider an amendment to keep the teacher pension funding out of any type of excess spending calculation, or if there was ever a cap put on us again, that shouldn't be included in that calculation. That's technically, it's an unfunded mandate, right?
Huge one.
We have to keep it. We can't cut it. So.
A lot can change in the next month.
I know.
But I would just, if any of you have any concerns, just email your rep today, tonight, early tomorrow morning, because that's when they're,
They're voting on it in the House tomorrow, and then it'll cross over to the Senate, I think.
There are two other bills that we're still moving forward at. Megan, did you want to talk to the special ed?
Yep, so the two most relevant ones for us are the special ed funding bill and Act 166 early ed. So they have both met crossover, and so they're going from, the special ed funding bill was a House bill, and now it's in the Senate. The Act 166 was the opposite, it was in the Senate, and now it's in the, headed to the House. There was actually testimony today on the special ed funding bill. That bill, as of right now, still moves us to a more flexible funding model, which we support. Its current version still has an early adoption program so that you could get that flexible funding and some support early. And it changes a little bit our extraordinary cost reimbursement. The biggest discussion with that bill right now is all about what to set this block grant at. How do you decide how much money schools get? Without going into detail about something called maintenance of effort, which you probably don't want to go into depth about, but maintenance of effort is a federal responsibility that districts have to not cut the amount they provide to special ed students. And if you do reduce that amount, you have to give back federal dollars. So if this bill were to cost contain in the legislation, so cause schools to immediately spend less, that puts federal dollars at risk. So our biggest, input to the group is to be really aware of those implications. So the thoughts right now are, if they're looking to create systems change that gains efficiencies, they need to do that in a way that sort of level funds as opposed to decreases funding. The AOE has testified they've got some feedback about whether or not they support an early adopter. A lot of the details of the bill, there's some feedback, but it sits in Senate right now. Act 166, which is early ed, that bill effectively draws a line down the middle between public pre-K and private pre-K. It maintains a voucher system for 10 hours a week of publicly funded pre-K, but instead of school districts managing and partnering with public programs, and so the money sort of comes to us. We contract with providers, and the money then goes to the providers. The AHS would take over. The money would come directly from the ed fund to those partner programs. For us, my biggest worry, if that were to go through as is we have a long-standing and very robust partnership system with our 47 partners, and it results in better connections with these programs that serve a high percentage at this point of our kids. And to create a system that doesn't kind of require that partnership, we hope that many of our partners would still kind of voluntarily work with us, but we wouldn't have there would be no responsibility for them to do that. So it's really hard to predict where that bill will go, I think, because there's a lot of advocacy on kind of the public ed side and the early ed side. Happy to answer questions. That might be more detail than you wanted, sorry.
that was not too much detail.
I feel like there's so much more this session than there was, well, it's the second year, but I just feel like there's so much, they're bigger.
Meatier.
Yeah. Karen?
Before things started ramping up there so quickly, the Vermont School Board Association was going to do a series of trainings around ed funding and the system, and I think they've halted some of that because things are changing so fast they can't change the
Right.
slides fast enough. But I wonder if we would, if we could get somebody to come to the retreat, have a hour or something from somebody from VSBA, depending on where things end up, to give us a little bit more detailed briefing, since things, again, depends where things end up, but we'll know by then.
Specifically on ed funding, or everything, all the pieces, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think we could think about it as a resource in general as for some other parts of the retreat as well, but particularly ed funding, since it's because it's becoming so much more complex and potentially changing this year.
It's supposed to be easier. This is supposed to be
Right.
easier. Okay. Principals report, 6.3. Any questions on the principal's report?
Can I just make a recognition here? I just want to say that I was very proud of our principals and our superintendent this week and this past month in their response to the student walkout. I just wanted to say that on the record. I've been reading nationally about school board and local school reactions to the national walkout, and I was very proud of CBSD and the way that the staff handled that issue. Snowstorm notwithstanding.
Plus one on that as well.
Yeah, so I really appreciate that.
Very thoughtful.
That's the way new people say, I agree.
That along.
Plus one.
6 foot Thomas.
The day before,
New
so
people, young
we
people.
started back in February, the day before winter break, we had our annual winter carnival. The one project we had on student council this year was to kind of change the normal course of events. Traditionally, freshmen are booed and chanted at, and we wanted to create a culture that was more supportive of freshmen.
I didn't see that on the earlier slide.
They're moving.
That's my question.
Oddly enough, a lot of the freshmen complained that it was too boring. But we stand by our actions, because we think that it's creating a better environment in the school. Over February break, there were 3 international trips, and I noticed that's the next point in the agenda. So I will say, though, that I went on the Costa Rica trip with the band program. That was an awesome experience in every way. So after break, Student Council ran its annual blood drive, which went quite smoothly. And we had a lot of first-time donors, so good sign, hoping to start a tradition of donating throughout
you
their
give?
lives. I did not.
He was just back from Costa Rica, so he had to read through. I gotcha, go ahead.
Then tomorrow, juniors are taking SATs, which is a new project that we're starting. I believe that the SAT scores will be used to measure school performance in place of SBACs. And this is designed because we thought that juniors would care if the school paid for them to take an SAT and said this could be your SAT score if you choose to use it and do well and are happy with your score. Whereas SBACs, why should they care? They have AP exams and a lot of other stuff going on, and the scores don't really do anything directly for them. So we're hopeful that this will be a more accurate representation of our school's performance. And a lot of juniors are pretty happy about it, the school paying for them to take an SAT. So seniors have the day off to work on Grad Challenge, which is wrapping up this week, the paper due on Friday. So our next project on Student Council is breaking up into small groups and tackling a variety of issues. The one I'm most excited about is student evaluations of teachers, because at CVU, or in the district, we have teachers evaluate students, students evaluate themselves, administrators evaluate teachers. But really the only missing link is student feedback towards teachers. And this is not designed to be like a gotcha, you're fired. It's designed to be, this teacher does really well in this area, for example, explaining the content, but a student might say, oh, I think that we take too many formatives in class, and that time could be better spent working through the content. And because I'm involved in it, I feel obliged to mention that the Scholars Bowl State Championship is this Saturday, along with the national walkout that a lot of students, or that some students are taking a coach bus to go down to Washington to participate in. So, yeah.
I remember when I was first on the board, we talked about students evaluating teachers, and it's almost like the teachers have done too good of a job doing all of this proficiency-based learning and personalized learning. You guys are so smart now that you know how to best evaluate the teachers,
Yeah, we're
right?
using a 1 through 4 scale, actually.
That is very cool. Thank you for that.
I would just
Pleasure.
weigh in on the other reason that schools are paying for the SATs is that we really hope that there are some kids who will look at their scores and go, maybe I can go to college. You know, and that's a really pretty powerful way of moving kids along too.
So does that mean we can bag the SBACs
For those grades?
So we don't.
For the 11th graders. We have to do it for 9th graders now. So they,
changed the requirement from 11th grade to 9th grade for high school.
But you had to do something in 11th grade?
But in
Yes.
11th or 12th grade, you have to do one of a menu of college and career ready assessments, the SAT being one of those.
So they don't have to do both, though.
No, each student has to have done something on that menu.
Right.
Is that where like the ASVAB is too, or something
Yes,
like that? Okay.
exactly.
Do we know participation?
Military tests.
Compared to last year, or?
This is the first year that we've
Anticipated.
done anything other than SBAC, and so we will at the end of the year.
But we don't know, like, how many have signed up, or?
For the
It's
SATs,
it's all,
everyone's taking
required.
it.
Everyone, oh,
Everyone.
okay.
Yep.
Which will give us a little discontinuity when you look at scores, because
Right.
it used to be sort of, you couldn't really use the SATs.
Self-selected.
Yeah, self-selected. You could kind of, we always held back on saying, look how good our school is because of the SAT scores, because it was self-selected subs.
And did they have a choice, SAT or ACT, or just SAT?
Just SAT this year. I mean, they can still go out and take the ACT on their own.
But the SAT.
And we, yeah, and we would still get that data.
Just as, like, what is just the difference in price over 20 years? Like, how much does it cost to sign up for the SAT nowadays?
I'm going to forget. Adam, you remember off the top of your head?
I think it's around $75.
Okay.
Did you get a
We
volume
I mean,
discount?
As a school district, we get a much better.
Can you remind me of the difference between the SAT and the ACT?
One scored out of multiple
Varies by
hundred and one
school.
scored out of.
Exactly.
Take a 25?
I feel like the ACT is more fact-based, and the SAT is more theoretical and logic. I don't,
The
But just look at my
ACT
kids.
is broken into I never actually took the ACT. I took the SAT. I was happy with my score. But my understanding is that the ACT is broken into smaller sections, whereas the SAT has 4 main sections, and then the essay, which is optional on both exams now. The ACT is scored, we're at the maximum score of 36, and it's based on a curve. So if a student took the test and got 1 question right, and everyone else that took the test got 0 questions right that day, that student would get a 36. Whereas the SAT is based on how many questions you get right.
Why would you take one over the other?
It's a lot of students just prefer one, or like the style of test, shorter sections, more reading, is generally, which is the ACT, is preferable for some students, whereas 4 long sections, reading, writing, 2 math sections, is better for others.
Let's take both. And you'll find in,
My daughter took them both and then submitted the one where she has a higher percentile scores to, teach what she wanted.
so there's also a lot of regional trends. The Midwest, for instance, almost everybody takes the ACT and
ACT.
nobody takes the SAT, whereas the Northeast, it's the other way around.
It's interesting that hasn't changed in 25 years.
Nope.
No, the test has changed though.
Yeah, but like still, because I was hesitant to say that, because I was like, well, when I was growing up,
Nope, it's still
everybody in the Midwest took the ACT.
Makes you sound old.
the case.
Well,
all right.
people were sounding.
We're going to move on to
It makes me sound.
6.5 international trips. I'm just going to, this usually will never happen again, because items in our consent agenda, we don't discuss before we vote on them. We vote on them as a whole. But because international trips are something that was unique to the CVU, it is unique to the CVU community and the CVU board, and many people hadn't heard about the international trips, we thought it would be a good idea to maybe just give a brief overview so you knew what you were approving when we get to the consent agenda. So Catherine Riley is going to.
Hello, folks. Just got log in over there.
He could Skype in.
Yeah, who would be the next junior? We usually decide that this spring, when we elect reps. This spring? Yeah.
12:15, right? Or something like
At work, we call this season deep winter now. It's not winter, it's deep winter. 'Cause we've had
What comes after deep winter?
spring.
Deeper
winter. Mud season, or spring. Now, 3 out of the last 4 years, we've had a major March storm.
We just had it, hopefully.
Good time to stand on yourself.
Kind of needed a break.
Yeah.
it'll take some time. It's okay.
Right.
These are cheaters, you know, so they're gonna some of these things.
Mhm.
Put it back in.
Right.
It's just about that.
Yes.
I'd get a headache.
That would give
Is
me-
it what?
I can sweat.
Oh, I think so. I think it's usually, I mean, is it usually, this seems more, it feels like it's a much more full agenda tonight than what I've seen
Okay.
sometimes.
Okay.
I'm not sure,
Okay.
that's true, but it feels like there's a lot going on.
And did they say that once a month there is a comedy? Once a month, and then
Right.
the other month for everybody?
The other, well, it's like, so one committee meeting a month and then one board meeting a month, so it's like every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
There would be either a board meeting or then a committee meeting, yeah. So there's really two meetings
Two
a
meetings in a month. I'm
yeah.
putting my tutors to do that.
I can squint, it's just I can't squint.
And then it sounds like the, it sounds like these three committees
Yeah.
meet
The lighting has a lot to do with it.
on,
If it's good
on
lighting,
that,
I can.
on a Tuesday, like, so
Okay.
these are evening meetings and then
Yeah.
a policy
How do you
committee.
know when they meet? How do
I think it's, so it would be 2 weeks from
Graduation.
tonight, and
Yeah.
we can find out,
So-
we can ask Lynn.
Why don't, while we're rating, why don't we move on to, we could move on to discussion matters 7.2. We could do graduation protocols. Does that require a slideshow?
No. I think Dave asked to put this on, right? Graduation protocols?
Are you looking at me?
Yeah.
I thought that.
I'm looking at 7.2
I know what the conversation is. It's that there will be an eighth grade graduations.
Oh, right. I know what this conversation is.
So there will be eighth grade graduations in each of our K-8 schools on the Thursday, June 14th. And we hope that people who represent their local boards will be at those graduations to the extent that you possibly can. And on Friday, the 15th, there will be a CVU graduation. And we hope that as many of you as possible will attend the CVU graduation. And you'll get a notice, I bet, from Sue Jipner beforehand that will say how many of you, or is it you, Sandy, that sends it out? One or the other, you'll get a note from them asking you if you plan to attend. We hope that you will.
Both the CV and the Shelburne or the Heinsberg.
Is that going to be on whatever email we get?
We can send a separate one for the K-8 graduation.
That'd be helpful.
I'm not sure how different it is in each district. I know Shelburne, somebody from the board speaks and shakes hands, but I would hope that would continue in the different districts, if that is a tradition. It's just not always gonna be accepted that the chair will do it.
Right.
Because they used to have that local chair.
Right.
The other thing I will say is for anybody who's never been to CVU graduation, it's the second greatest day of the whole year. It's unbelievable. I think everyone should go, if not to see Adam Bunting get a hug from
Every kid.
90% of the student body because they're so sad to be leaving CVU. But it's great.
And to listen to their remarkable speakers, student
I
speakers.
was gonna give my patented line on that, but I think everybody's heard it.
Maybe not.
That Bernie Sanders was the fifth best
Fifth
speaker
best
at the.
speaker at last year's graduation after all the student speakers. Right. I can't believe Russ was listening. I saw it.
I get all your best
Colleen.
punchlines.
Thank you. Catherine.
Back up, I heard an expectation that we didn't really talk about, and I just want to, that someone from the board would speak at each school?
No. In the schools where that has
I said I
been
hope
a
that-
tradition, it would continue. But it isn't a tradition everywhere. It is a tradition in some places.
Well, and it may have been in the past, it's just, if we were to do that, I would hope that there was some kind of consistency, but.
I don't think it didn't matter in the past. I don't know that
Right.
it's a big deal, but, in Shelburne, the board chair always spoke, and if we can, twist somebody's arm and get somebody to continue to do it, as long as you kept it short, it was a nice thing.
I think the big
That's true.
piece
But
is
if they
having,
don't do it in Heinsberg, I don't know that it much matters.
We have, but, Ray and I would be.
Well, Kelly's gonna kind of circulate around and do different ones because there's no
Apparently
St.
I'm
George
board
school.
clerk too, I just read the minutes.
I think the important thing is that there's board
I'm gonna get
presence at
paid
each, and
sometime.
I think we should work with the local administrations to see what works with them. They may
Right,
not
yes,
want to
that's
hear
what I
from
think.
us.
I'd love to
Yeah.
have like a graduating senior come and speak to the 8th graders.
But that's for them to decide locally.
Yeah.
All right, on to CVU travel, travel CVU.
Thanks for your patience. Sorry about that. So I'm Catherine Riley. Elaine and I were talking a few weeks ago related to a new project that some folks in the education world in Vermont are undertaking. And she asked me to come and talk to you just about travel at CVU in kind of an overview. Some of you have heard some of this or seen some of this before. This is new. You haven't seen this before. This is a new part of our website. We're trying to get all the trips to populate sites, and that would be where parents would get information prior to, during, and then pictures after the trip. So there's no fun pictures of Costa Rica yet, Thomas, but there will be. There is a cool. There are some cool blogs connected to that, though. Thanks, Lucian. So a few years ago, the CVU Travel Committee has actually been a committee at CVU since 2009, when Sean was the principal. This was not the mission statement of the committee. We don't even know if we're supposed to have a mission statement, but we were talking about CVU's mission statement and how that really tied into the experiences that students have when they travel. And so we did tweak it a little bit. And this was a few years ago, some of the work that we did, if you want to just take a moment and look at it. So I'm an administrator, and then it's faculty and 2 students. And one of the students who just got back from the trip is a small trip with international business to Haiti in February. Well, Thomas was in Costa Rica, 2 very different trips, but both with a lot of growth opportunity for students. One of those students, a quote from her was that the 11 days we spent in Haiti were life-changing. Meeting with high schoolers and vocational students to discuss business made me realize how much I took our education, along with many other things, for granted. The trip served as a learning experience and a much-needed reality check. I'm sure Thomas can think of his awesome quote about his trip as I go through this. Thanks, Lucian. Yeah, thanks. So these are every year we send out between 4 or 5, maybe 6 trips. And most of those trips rotate on a 2-year basis. The Costa Rica trip and the Haiti trip are 2 exceptions. The Costa Rica band trip is on a 4-year rotation. And in the intervening years, I think Mr. Miscavige takes you guys to New York City.
Yeah, there's a domestic trip.
A domestic trip.
2 years that there's, like in between every 4 years. So 2 years from now, there'll be a domestic trip, and then 2 years from now, there'll be an international trip.
Okay. The Haiti is connected to a class, and that got approval a few years ago to be an every year trip. So we have trips that go, most of the trips, I said, are every 2 years. We have a variety of trips. We try to send them out to different areas of the world. There are different costs associated with the trips. There are different, each trip has a different purpose. So Thomas went to Costa Rica with the band, or with members of the band. They performed. They had 3 performances. They had a lot of interaction with students when they were doing the performances. The Haiti trip is connected to a class. The French trip, we sent one out a couple years ago. We're going again next year, hopefully. And that's an extension of French class, so that's for upper level French students. And it's, I wouldn't say it's immersion, it's a kind of exposure and an opportunity to practice and play with the language in a really authentic way. Similarly, the Costa Rica, or the Dominican Republic trip, which is not on here. The Dominican Republic trip, which also went out in February, is offered to Spanish students. And again, they do real community service for a week, and they get to practice and play with their language from the time they get on the plane until they get back on the plane. They're not supposed to speak English. There may be some cheating, but that's really the idea, is that just like in Spanish classes here, you'll go in and they're really at the upper levels. They're not speaking any English. Other trips, the England-Scotland trip, which will go out next year, is really kind of a cultural experience for students. It's an opportunity for one of the focuses of that trip is to try to get first-time travelers. There's no language barrier. It's not connected to a class at all, so it's open to everyone. Peter and I were just talking about doing another kind of similar type trip at a lower cost point, maybe in the Cape Breton area, that would kind of expand our that continuum of costs that we have. The Galapagos trip went out for the first time last year, and is hopefully going out next year. That's actually a 4 science credit trip where students do a semester seminar from September through March, where they come in one evening a month and work on journaling. And this is a copy of the journal that was created for the Galapagos trip. I'll just kind of peruse through that. I do have a picture of that. So that's actually a 4 credit trip. Has been in the past other 4 credit trips to Peru and a 4 credit trip to England, Shakespeare in London. And the Italy trip is connected to art, and Abby will be going in a couple weeks. And Latin, so upper level Latin students and art students. Again, that's a trip that's gone for many years, and is not a language trip, but it's a real cultural immersion and exposure to some of the amazing art. And the Denmark trip is a sister school exchange, which I'm excited about building more of. That's where the Danish kids come to CVU for a week. They've been coming in February, and then we send our students this April. We send our students to Denmark for a week, where they stay with the host family and stay at a school, and then there's a little side trip to Stockholm. So that's kind of the array, and you can see the price points from the Haiti trip's actually going down next year. It won't be 24, it'll actually be 2,000 because of the work that Tammy Jo has been able to do and the work they're doing with the Vermont Haiti Project. So from 2,000 at the lower end, it's not an inexpensive end, they're all expensive, but at the lower end to the Galapagos trip, which is 4,200. I don't know if you can pick Thomas out in the light, but he's in that mix. This is what I love. I did the Costa Rica trip 4 years ago, and this is the part that's most powerful, I think, from my perspective, that interaction among our students, between our students and the Costa Rican kids. This is from this year's. The hug is from this year's Denmark trip. I just put one hug in, but it was a whole mess of hugging that was going on when they left. So the Danish students had been in touch with our students since around mid-December. They arrived at the airport, and our kids had signs for them. There was hugging before they had, right when they met, and then this is when they were getting on the bus to go back to Denmark. The more exciting part is when Garrett McCurtain and Mark Pogak go to Denmark with the students in April. They're going to all meet at the train station. And when we went 2 years ago, it was when they saw each other. It was just this really beautiful reunion, and it's a very different experience than some of the other trips because there's that immersion and there's that ongoing connection. I was told that I may be invited to a wedding, I said 5 years from now, from one of the connections that was made a couple years ago. That's an ongoing romance. This is a trip from 2 years ago where our students are with the Danish students at the place called Tivoli in Copenhagen. So they're doing a homestay, so that's not organized by the school. That's where the kids are staying with their host families, and all of a sudden they just kind of showed up and they were all kind of in the same area. Were you on the Denmark? You were on the Denmark trip, right? Lucian was on the Denmark trip. So one of the questions is funding. That's a question that always comes up. The students pay for the trips. Students, families pay for the trips. There are ways that we reduce the price of the trip. If you know John Bennett, he has been working. Continues to work with the England, Scotland folks to reduce the trip, and it's every couple of weeks he'll say, "I got him down another $100 per kid." So the teachers who are running the trips work hard to get the best price for students. Some of the companies we work with have scholarships built in that teachers will use or target towards students who are in need of financial support. But they do work hard to get the best prices. There is fundraising that goes on. I don't know if you guys did any fundraising. Oh, you did the.
A couple of fundraisers, yeah.
You did the Christmas tree.
Yeah, the big one was the Christmas tree fundraiser, and then we also did a swing dance.
You did swing some.
Made it fair, made it reasonable, not as much as the Christmas.
The Christmas tree collection is a big fundraiser that is actually nice for our community and raises a good chunk of change. Some of the trips, we didn't do any fundraising for Denmark. It's on the less expensive end because of the homestay piece, and the Dominican Republic trip, I don't know as they do any fundraising. That's actually the least expensive. Was $1,900 this year. Again, because they are doing community service and they're staying in a no-frills facility. This year, because of the snowstorm, they got to stay in a very fancy hotel their last couple days with a very nice pool, but that was pretty magical how the chaperones were able to work that out. But it's really kind of a lower frills trip. This is the last year we've had scholarship money. We used to, back in 2010, we had a scholarship that was, each trip got the amount that it cost for the trip as scholarship money. So the Peru trip back in 2010 was $3,400, and so we got $3,400, and we were able to pay for half of 2 students who had never traveled outside of the United States. That scholarship money has shrunk. The last 5 years, we have had $2,000 per trip as scholarship money, which is used, which the chaperones kind of facilitate the students who need financial support. This is the last year we have that money. So we won't have the scholarship money for trips going forward. We're working with Maureen Wheeler and the Parent Association to think about some kind of bigger ongoing annual fundraisers that could support things like travel scholarships and other unfunded activities that the school has previously, like the Ultimate Frisbee Club, that would allow for students to have an additional source of funding for things like travel and unfunded clubs. This is a Haiti trip. I read the quote from Megan Mahoney. Again, it was a smaller group. They were able to travel throughout, and that they are working with the Vermont Haiti Project, if you're familiar with that. Lucian? One of the pieces when you travel internationally, obviously, is safety. We've unfortunately needed to kind of increase our focus on this in the last few years. And one of the, we've always looked at the State Department travel advisories and taken those under advisement. We've always, the trip leaders have very clear expectations. We have parent meetings before students go on the trips, very close to when the trip is going out. An administrator speaks at every one of those parent meetings and helps remind parents of the conversations that would be helpful for them to have with their students before the trip goes out. Reminds parents of the importance of the students following the expectations, and students hear that reminder that goes to their parents. Something we've added, I think this was 2 years ago, was the enrolling trips in the Smart Travel enrollment program through the State Department. So if something were to happen, we would be enrolled in that, and that just provides additional support and communication. This is the science course, the Galapagos course from 2 years ago. It was based on the journal was based on a journal that was created by one of our graduates who was at the University of California, Berkeley, and had gone to Australia as a college course, created this really cool journal. We based our course on that journal, and Nicole Gorman, who teaches AP Bio here, is the teacher of record. And so students, before we went to Mr. Bunting's house to do some observing because he has a really pretty awesome bird feeder system going on there. So we did a lot of work teaching the students the skills of field journaling. The picture to the right is the students in the evening doing some journaling and kind of capturing, thinking about what they saw. And the light's not great, but this is students actually journaling. We camped for a couple of nights in a place where the giant tortoises were right there among us. And so you kind of, that just gives you a kind of a flavor of the curricular piece of this trip. Thomas could speak to the curricular piece, the band piece, even though it's not a credit-bearing trip right now, but Mr. Miscavige and I have been talking about the possibility of that. These are just pictures from the journal to give you the curricular piece. I picked a student who drew very well, but even the students who didn't draw very well, the kind of the reflective piece of the journal was really for me really powerful to see what they were taking away. Thanks. And here's our kind of our thinking going forward. We're working with the Vermont Center for International Learning Partnerships, which is a local organization that's a few years old that's trying to bring not only Vermonters together with international students, but also kind of bring Vermonters together. And we're working with this with our own students organization, which is called ROC, Refugee Outreach Committee, that one of our graduates from last year began as a student, Natalie Meyer. That's really grown into this very impressive nonprofit. And so we have connections. The Denmark connection is a sister school connection, which is, it will now be every other year they will come here and we will go there. On the off year, we've connected them with Harwood. So on the off year, they'll go to Harwood, and the Harwood kids will go to Denmark. That's a nice little triangulation of our school with the school in Denmark and Harwood. We have the business class is connected in both Haiti and Turkey, virtually connected in Turkey. The school is located very close to the Syrian border, so that's not something we've explored as a trip. The connection through Natalie's organization has led to a virtual connection between one of the corps and Ghana, students in Ghana. and using Zoom technology. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but like a Google Hangout type technology. And we're going to use that same technology and connect with students at a rural school in Kenya. And that, we're making those connections 2 weeks from now. The 2 people from that school are actually going to be in Vermont. So we're going to be bringing them here to, I told Adam, we're going to be bringing them here to tour and then to kind of set up that connection. I was, Puerto Rico spelled wrong. I was just at UVM at the F-score presentations. It's put on by the Basin Resilience to Extreme Events. I don't know that much about it, but we have 2 science teachers who've been doing it for years, and we had, of the 8 presentations by students, 2 by students in Puerto Rico, by students from Rutland High School, by UVM students and Castleton students, and 2 of the presentations were by CVU students. Really impressive science, a lot of which I didn't totally understand, but really impressive, authentic research that's happening right here, and that brings together Vermont students with this school, this high school in Puerto Rico. And we're hoping to grow that to possible sister school relationship, which they already have with BFA Fairfax. So again, we're trying to triangulate that connection. And this was the DR trip. So this is, I'd say this is our one trip that's really, our one international trip that's very community service based. We send a group to North Carolina in April to do the alternative spring break with Habitat for Humanity. That trip's just under $1,000, and that is all hands-on community service. But the DR trip is, with the exception of the beach, and this year 3 days at the beach, because they couldn't get home, this is really both the immersion and the community service piece. And I think we probably could leave it at that picture. Click to the next one and then click to that. Yeah, you can go back to that picture of the kids. Go back to Prince.
Yep, sounds good.
There you go. So that's, I think that hit the kind of a quick overview of the continuum of types of trips that we have, the costs of the trips, and a little bit of the power of the trips, but certainly I think the students can speak to the power of the trips more than I can, and they'd be very happy to come and do that at a later date if you would like them to.
Correct.
About how many students go annually?
And is it primarily like juniors and seniors, or how's that kind of spread through the grades?
Most of the trips are juniors and seniors. The Denmark trip this will be the 3rd time we're going. There have been more sophomores on that trip. I'm not sure why. I would say on average, Haiti is the exception. Most trips have around or between 20 and 30 students.
So, I mean, is it 100 kids go every year? Is it 300 kids go every year? What's the?
I would say more like just over 100 students.
Okay.
Sure.
Yep, thank you.
Colleen, did you?
Well, I had those same questions, participation rate compared to the school population, that, and how many kids are going on multiple trips, how many kids are not going at all. And for kids who are not going, obviously money is an obstacle, but what are the other obstacles? Have there been explorations of that? So I was more interested in the participation rate and obstacles to participation.
I think that the travel committee meets monthly, and there have been a lot of discussions around the obstacles. I think one obstacle is obviously money. Another obstacle is kind of just an interest and maybe a perception that wouldn't be a possibility for students. So those are things that we're trying to approach the trips in a more cohesive manner as far as the advertising of them. There's always outreach by trip leaders to get students who haven't traveled before or may see that as not a possibility. So I think those are probably, and another one is there are some students, it's very intimidating to the idea of traveling at this point in their lives. But certainly, if we had tons and tons of scholarship money, we would have more students traveling. One of the pieces that we're trying to grow within the school, and I think the sister school program does this. A sister school in Puerto Rico would be much less, a less expensive trip than the Denmark trip, which is on the less expensive end. But the sister school brings students from other cultures to CVU, and that changes that dynamic with this particular sister school. The idea is that they do some collaborative project while they're here and while we're there. And then trying to grow the virtual connections that we have with, kind of in pockets. That also adds that exposure to our students here.
Erin, with those kind of,
I have, a couple questions, and then just maybe things for the board to consider, or even potentially a retreat item. But do teachers go through the same? Are there multiple travel companies, or is it vary?
There are multiple travel companies, and we looked into a couple years ago, if we all went through one travel company, do we get a better deal? And we don't. So trip leaders have the ability to choose a travel company. They have to have, obviously, they have to have insurance wherever they travel.
And if it's a trip that is not associated with a class, how do students learn about that? What is the introduction to it, the mechanism that information is shared? And
the announcement will be in the CVU written announcements tomorrow or Thursday. And it lists the 4 international trips that are going out next year. Just kind of a quick blurb with the dates of the parent meetings. And then there will be posters that are put out. The goal is another one of the goals is to bring back that experience from the trips, which the Galapagos trips brings back the experience to share in school. And so trying to grow the opportunities to bring back the experience so more younger students know about the trips. And making sure we're on a kind of a regular cycle, so Thomas can say, oh, well, I'm a freshman, when I'm a senior, I want to do, that's the trip I want to do. And having that time to both plan and save.
I think it was maybe my first board meeting. We were talking about Galapagos, and I know for the CVU board, it had a lengthy conversation that night about equity and the concern around cost and access to the trips. And so I guess these are phenomenal opportunities and really amazing work that happens here, and opportunities that a lot of high schools, I don't think, provide anything like this. But I guess I want to go on record in our board and hope that we continue to talk and push on this, because 2 years later now we're going to have even fewer scholarships. And though curriculum is not our domain, this is curriculum, but with a really specific cost, and we do hold the purse strings here. So if we're going to have this pretty robust travel program here, I think we need to have a pretty serious conversation around how we're going to do that in an equitable way, because these are some pretty phenomenal opportunities that I think are probably pretty out of reach for a good chunk of students. So both from the cost part and if it's a lot of upper level classes, there's sort of a double equity barrier of upper level classes and cost. And I don't mean that at all in terms of your organization and all the work to organize all of these trips, but I mean us as a community, as the school board, in thinking about really, extraordinary opportunities and who has access to them and how we. So I don't know if it's worthy of a board, I know there's a million things on the retreat agenda, but I know this was a really robust discussion 2 years ago at the CVU board, and I feel like we're here in the same place, and so I hope we can continue to move that discussion and potential action forward. Maybe even.
I will say that trip, if you run that part of that conversation, that trip eventually, we did a really cool fundraiser in the spring and the fall, and hired out our students within the community, and that
Yes,
felt
I remember I
to
saw all
us
those in
like,
Front Porch Forum, yeah.
it wasn't a buy wrapping paper
Yep.
fundraiser, it was a
Yep.
real, the folks in the community for whom our students worked appreciated the work they did, and students were able to make a good chunk of money on an expensive trip.
Yep.
And we did teddy bear for Valentine's Day, not Valentine's Day, Christmas, which is, I don't know if you ever worked at the teddy bear factory, but that was rather entertaining as well. So some of the more expensive trips do have, I would say the more expensive trips have more fundraisers. So the Costa Rica, Italy trip, the England, Ireland, Wales will do some sort of fundraiser. The Galapagos does more fundraisers. But right, and we talked about before, it's an equity, there's equity in lots of different, equity issues in lots of different pockets. And that's a main reason why the travel committee was established. And we think that the scholarship piece helped with the equity. I think that we have some interesting ideas about some funding through the CVU parent organization that could also raise some capital, but that's.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So I went on the Costa Rica trip this past break. I also went on the France trip my sophomore year. And I went to Iceland with the Vermont Youth Orchestra the summer after my freshman year, which obviously wasn't with the school. I mean, my parents have been very supportive, so I'm thankful for that. But the importance I see in these trips is that anyone can go to any one of these countries, but this is the only opportunity that students have to go to these countries in groups. And when I went to France and Costa Rica, I was able to interact with people and the culture there with friends, and that made it a lot more of an in-depth and enjoyable experience. And then I was able to take that experience back to CVU and share it with people that had the same experience and with people who weren't on the trip. But rather than just one person sharing it with a group, it was a group of people sharing it with a larger group. And I think that message, that kind of experience with another culture was brought back more effectively to the student body than if one student just went to Costa Rica and came back and was like, oh, it's cool. So that was my 2 cents.
Thanks.
Okay, so you guys elected me, and you didn't hear that the latest I've been at a board meeting was, I think, 1:15 in the morning. We used to have board meetings go. Yeah. Here we go. 7.0 discussion matters. 7.1 Rise Roland Foundation Grant.
Hello, so my name is Abby Bowker,
And I'm Peter Langella.
and we're here to share with you something that we've been working on all year. I'm going to go back a little bit to Dan's presentation earlier and let you in on a secret, because we are actually superheroes of our own right here, and we're going to share with you what kind of super project we've been up to, and hopefully we'll be able to bend the time-space continuum and not keep you here too long. So if all of that can happen while we're able to deliver something that is meaningful to you and answer some of your questions at the end, I think we will walk away in a really good space. So we're going to introduce to you RISE, which is a reflective, interest-based student experiences program that we are crafting this year through our work with the Roland Foundation. Oh, yes, this is the one.
Sorry.
This is the one at What If screen.
What if?
What if? What if we could build more creative, integrated, and equitable school communities?
What if students were able to take part in interest-based experiences all year long?
What if each week was dedicated one day each week was dedicated entirely to these experiences.
What if these experiences happen in 6-week rotations to allow students to take part in dozens of them throughout their high school career?
What if faculty set an example for intrinsic motivation and lifelong learning on a weekly basis?
And what if these experiences were tied not to department or discipline credits, but transferable skills, graduation standards, and a personal learning process?
So we are working this year with the Rowland Foundation, and the Rowland Foundation is a nonprofit organization that basically creates superheroes out of teachers. And to go to something that Russ said earlier tonight, it helps to foster teacher leaders building into leadership roles within their school communities. It's also like a research and development fund, because we're looking at ways of innovating and creating opportunities at our schools. And it's a small cohort. Every year they do about 5 $100,000 grants. This year they ended up having such difficult time selecting the different projects that they awarded 7 $75,000 grants. And this is part of the reason why we're a superhero team, is that we're able to take the time to do this work. So both of us this year are working half-time in our respective roles at school, and the other half-time is spent working on this project. And so the Rowland Foundation is really a wonderful organization that helps to support that innovation and that leadership for our state, for the teachers of our state. And it just gives you a little bit of a background, like what are these two people doing with this project, and how is this being funded? It's being funded through a grant that we applied for last January.
And so a lot of the money goes toward the release time that Abby just talked about, and so we each have a half-time, long-term sub in our roles, which is Abby teaches students art, and I am one of CVU's librarians in our normal role.
So as we were thinking about our project, we had to develop what we call an aim. And an aim statement helps to guide our work and make sure that we're heading toward a product that we are hoping to achieve. So our aim is that all students will be enrolled in interest-based experiences of their choosing one day each week.
And then you might want to know the why. Why do we think students should be enrolled in these experiences one day each week? And so we came up with a problem statement. And we think our current educational model lacks regular, system-wide, and equitable opportunities to develop and cultivate interests. And so to help solve that, we're talking about RISE that we'll get into more depth with, but we think it better accounts for the whole student, their interests and values. It connects to the pursuit of lifelong learning, and it increases engagement and a desire to learn. And our guiding principle is that this model shows that, as a student-centered school committed to Vermont Act 77 and our new action plan goals of personalization and proficiency, we value the marriage between conventional and flexible learning opportunities to meet the needs of all students. And that has a little bit of jargon in it, and so this will explain it to you better. We were presenting our ideas to a group of students who are taking a class called Think Tank, where they're really investigating big ideas in education. And so one of the students in the class, who's also part of our Nexus program, where they design a lot of their own learning, said, you know what, Peter, if you and Abby can help the school implement this project, what it will do is it will normalize the idea of flexible pathways. She said, when I'm learning in Nexus and I'm out in the community talking with people, I have to act like a pioneer, and I have to explain that I'm doing something really, really wild by really driving my own learning. And if you can create a program where all students are taking ownership of their learning in this way, that will normalize flexible pathways and set us up for the capacity for all students to have agency in their education.
So as we're taking a look at the work that we had ahead of us, we knew that we were going to need to have a Cracker Jack team to help us through that. And the first and foremost person that can help us through that is the supportive principal that we have. And it has been incredible to have Adam as our principal, because not only has he been supportive of the project from day one, he's also been able to give us the leadership and autonomy to make the work happen and not check in on us every 2 seconds, but to give us the leeway and the report back. Part of that leeway he's given us is time to work with our colleagues. So on our Wednesday late start, I'm sure you've heard of the PLC time, that's a professional development time. We've established a team of folks from our school and from our district that include multiple different people. We'll show you on this next slide. People from all sorts of different disciplines in our school. We also have Alan Miller, who is a PLC coordinator for our district, and we have a couple of student representatives on our PLC team. And this group comes together to work through the issues and stuck points that we have and are sounding board for us. They help us refine and reflect. They help us to set the tone and direction for the work, not just in our insular PLC time, but also how do we send this message forward to our community? How do we share it with our faculty? How do we share it with our staff? How do we involve our students? And so it's been a treat to work with this group of people all year. And while we intended to meet every week, it sometimes didn't work to be weekly, but it certainly was very regular, and it's been a good process.
And we've also had an opportunity through the Roland Foundation to meet with the group outside of our regularly scheduled Wednesday meeting. And so the Roland Foundation facilitated a retreat in Burlington in September to really kick off the work, where our whole group was able to go and spend an entire day together. And then we were working with a facilitator from an organization who partners with the Roland Foundation called Eagle Rock School and Professional Development Center out of Estes Park, Colorado. And they're funded in a way where all you have to do is get on their schedule. They cost no money to work with as long as they're available. So we worked with a professional facilitator, and the woman who we were paired with also came back and worked with us last month. And again, Adam was gracious enough to allow our whole group to take one full day off and have subs, and we were able to do some more really in-depth planning work with our group. And it's been a great experience to have this very diverse and skilled group to work with.
So on to the proposal itself. Our first interest in this actually came about 5 years ago, when Peter had gone to a Roland event and learned about year-end studies. Year-end studies is something that happens at Burlington High School and at Rutland High School. And it's 2 weeks at the end of the year where students are doing a lot of different kinds of experiences, from a seminar type course called Math of the Simpsons all the way through CSI Burlington. And so you can see there are lots and lots of different opportunities within that. And we said, you know, we really wanted at that time to investigate that. We spent time doing that when Jeff was principal, and working our community here at the school to think about that and explore that as an option. And then we started to consider this application to the Roland Foundation and thought, you know, why at the end of the year? Why 2 weeks at the end of the year? We want to do this in the school year. We want to create year in studies so that it's embedded as part of our regular learning experience and learning exposure. Most of our interest-based learning in schools tends to happen in pockets. It could be an alternative model to a limited number of students, or it could be something that's happening in a particular class or as a one-off type of project within a class. But these learning experiences really can open up students in ways that a conventional model might not. And it leaves students wanting more. When they have that experience, they usually are hoping for more of that kind of experience. So this is helping us to create a program that will meet that need and bridge that gap really intentionally.
And so this type of learning is really, can be a catalyst to help us get further along with our alignment with all of the proficiency-based graduation requirements. And so whereas in a conventional class, you have a teacher who is licensed and endorsed in a particular area, teaching content in that particular area, and this is more free-flowing and interdisciplinary. And so students and teachers can be learning together in things that are just based on interests, their needs, their passions, and so the opportunities become almost endless as long as we can match up a student with a faculty member who can facilitate that learning for them. And so you see on there examples like, things that we do in the summer because there's not really time to fit it in. This is an opportunity where that could happen in examples like doing something at the summit of Campbell's Hump. We have a writing on the trail class or painting on the trail. This is a perfect opportunity to do some of the sustainability and innovation work that we're working on in the school, so that you can still do class and you can do this, and we can find a way to make those coexist without competing against each other.
Each of those offerings will be considered of student readiness, and when we give you a handout in a little bit, you'll be able to see that there are different varying levels of independence. So from structured to guided to fully independent levels that all connect then to our framework for graduation as well. So just to give you a brief tour, and this we're going to probably speed through this section.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm going to give you that time warp
Yep.
power, okay? Because we want to be able to lay down a little bit about the groundwork that we've done this year so that you can not just hear the product but understand our process. But I also want to respect your time. So the first phase, we really did this big asset inventory where we thought about our strengths as an organization, the strengths as a district, thinking about what we have here as a physical place. We have wonderful grounds. We have incredible facilities. We have equipment that many other high schools got rid of a long time ago in a short-sighted moment that really are so lucky to have maintained throughout the years. And so we've compiled all of these different factors and thinking about how they can help drive us toward that aim. So big slide, lots of words. Just in a quick recap, we thought the primary drivers were here, and then there are secondary drivers. The secondary drivers sometimes turn into tertiary drivers, and we took a look at all of these different factors and figured out some of those keystone ingredients that would really help to move the project forward and make things fall into place. The one that was really apparent to us early on was that we needed to deal with our schedules and systems. And in particular, that probably raises some anxiety for our faculty. Like, well, what am I going to be doing at 10:03? What is this going to look like for me on a Tuesday? What is this going to look like for me on a Thursday? So that was one area that we ended up spending.
And one thing you'll notice, this has this little box with the first version of our AIM, which said next year, 2018-19, which is not going to happen. That people will be doing something one day each week next year. But something we set that goal a while ago, something we wanted to build.
So the next phase was working with research and development. So if you know that these are the main drivers, what are you going to do about it? You have to really look at what other models are out there. You have to take into account what different constituency groups are looking for different input. And so we really took all of this information into account and spent a lot of time on that systems and schedules driver.
And so this is kind of, I hope you can see that. It doesn't really matter too much what the individual thing says, but we did get all the way into the tertiary drivers, and sometimes we even went to a fourth level. And each of our PLC team members went in on a subgroup based on their own interests. So we're trying to do for our faculty what we're hoping to eventually do for our students. where we get involved in a project and then can choose where we want to be. And so all of us went into these groupings and investigated all of these different levels. Some of them are things that we have quite a lot of control over, and then some of them are things that we don't have a lot of control over as far as the faculty in building level. Like, for example, learning management systems down here, that's something that, is a district level decision, whereas some of these other things are really things that we can possibly really advocate for a strong change for within the building. And so we have to navigate all of that. And as we talked out these things, all of our research and visits really played into that. And we found out, as we get to the next one here, is that slide here?
Shouldn't be.
I think we got rid of that slide for this pretty good presentation. Anyway, one of the things that we really found out when we went on our visits is that a master schedule of a school is a real pedagogical choice that is based on and aligned with a school's values. And so one of the things we did was we took our group and our team through a values assessment and then had them start, rank is not really the correct word, although I can't really think of a better one, where they're starting to say, oh, okay, if we did this with a schedule, and we did this for student experiences, is that there?
That was this
Yeah,
one.
okay.
Yeah, that's all right. We're just
Sorry.
going to flip-flop those.
Okay, thank you.
It's part of my superpower.
Thank you. And so then when you see, okay, if we make this change with the schedule, this happens. Something will happen no matter what schedule you use, and then people who think, oh, I actually valued this higher, will then be forced to readjust and think, I need to reassess my values because I actually am not liking what I'm seeing there. And something that our group was really surprised to learn is that of all the schools we visited this year, which is many, not one has the exact same weekly and yearly schedule. Not one school. Even schools that are neighbors that seem to have the same schedule, they actually don't, because they do advisory differently, or they do callback differently, or they have 7 blocks instead of 8, or something's a little longer. And so there's all these changes, and then there's actually some places that get really wild, and it would really blow your mind if we showed you those schedules.
So we'd like to share with you what the actual proposal is. You're going to actually have to go back one.
Okay, sorry.
That's fine. So I'm just bending that around. So we'd like to share with you what our proposal is, and this is an overview document that helps to give you an idea of what the program would look like. And this document, we've shared earlier iterations with our entire faculty. We've shared it with varying student groups. We've come to student council. We've come to principal advisory council. We've gone to different classes and different programs, so like the Utopia class and the Life program. We've gone to talk with 31 of our advisories, and one of the wonderful things about visiting an advisory here at CVU is that you get usually like 10 to 14 students in the space, and they are from all different grade levels and all different backgrounds, so you're not going to kind of get the de facto I'm using this word carefully, but tracking. Like you might have a certain type of student that's on student council, where you might have one student council member in an advisory, but you might have also a student who's in our essentials program as well. So you have lots of different constituent groups. So we have shared this fairly widely at this point within our school community. We'll just give you a moment or two to scan through.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a quick
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
Do you have a baseline? Have you done a count survey of students to see where they are right now, so that?
We have quite a lot of student data, yeah. What do you baseline?
So the goal being, hope that students would be enrolled in interest-based experience of their choosing one day each week. Do we know now where our students are with that kind of a goal? Because students might do it outside of the regular day, but
Yeah.
do we know our baseline so that years from now, if this were implemented, you could say it's gone from here to here?
I don't know, we definitely, I.
You and I could jump in on that one if you
Sure,
want.
sure.
We did do an engagement survey to the entire school this year that actually Peter and Abby helped create to start establishing some of that data.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah. I think a little bit of a longer answer would be, I think many people would have a different opinion on what
What it
an
means.
interest-based experience
Right.
means. Yeah.
I imagine that's part of your
Yep.
work as well.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. It's a long meeting for us, they're not.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. We'd be happy to answer any clarifying questions as you go. I'll tell you just before we even get there, what we've been using for feedback with all of the groups that we've presented to is this idea of worries, wonderings, and wows. So concerns, questions, and bright spots, or things that you think are positive about the framework. And you could include those on your regular board exit card if you have anything. And Elaine and Jeff said that they'd definitely share those thoughts with us.
So what is your timeline now for, you said 18-19 was no
Right.
longer.
Right, so the next, Abby's gonna put up the next step slide. So we're continuing to work with our PLC group on refining schedule. And then there are lots of stakeholders in the building that we hope to meet with soon, which would be the leadership team who has been in the know along the way. There's the PLC leadership group. There's what's called the curriculum instruction team, which is made up of Catherine Riley, the instructional coaches, our personalized learning coordinator. There's members of our PLC team as well, students. And so those folks will help us try to refine an implementation plan. We think there's a chance we could do something for next year, some sort of pilot, which would then allow us to do a reflection and then create a plan for whether that's a 2-year or a 3-year or a 4-year. Those are the decisions that would be made hopefully soon, and then we would be coming to the district admin team with recommendations. Yeah.
One other question. So faculty, of course, will model for students what this might mean, or they could be modeling. I'm wondering if there's also baseline data related to faculty engagement in an activity. For example, if someone's a math teacher, but they love playing the guitar, do they have an opportunity to do that in a school environment on a break for 10 minutes? Although I know there's no such thing as a break, but I'm just thinking, do you have any data related to how your faculty are interpreting what this means for them as individuals as well?
Great, that's a great question. So I could see that as we develop this repertoire of offerings, that in the beginning, it is going to be pretty much faculty built, right? That's how Burlington pushed their year-end studies model forward, and it seems like is a really prudent way to begin. And one of our committee members is working on building a survey that would help gather information from our faculty. What type of a learning environment would you be most comfortable in teaching in? Would you be happiest teaching a structured seminar or a guided seminar, or helping students through an independent learning experience, or any of the above? And then from there, what kinds of things would you be interested in sharing? And it could be, I'm a science teacher, therefore I want to share science. And that's totally awesome, right? But it could be that I'm a science teacher that also has written and published books, and I can talk about my experience as an author. And so I think there are lots of different approaches that we'll be able to take once we have that survey data. I don't have it yet, but it's definitely in our action steps.
And
part of your asset inventory.
Right.
Right. And one thing to remember too is that, especially as we get into the more independent work, our faculty at CVU has been doing this for a long time with Grad Challenge, facilitating an inquiry based project that often has a serious community component. And so everyone is pretty comfortable and skilled at helping students access independent learning projects. And we hope to get better at that, but there is a capacity already for that.
I had a question about, given the wide range of interests students have, and I'm sure there are many who want to tie into the community in certain ways, such as through shadowing and engaging with various, whether it's professionals in engineering or medicine or whatever it might be. I'm just wondering if there's been any thought about, for example, in your team, tying someone from the community or bringing outside folks and their thoughts and voices into this process, so that it takes it from being within the school system itself and really broadens out into the community in terms of input that folks who are out in the field could be really providing you with ideas. And maybe that's going on now, but I'm wondering about that piece. I wasn't hearing that.
That's great. Do you want,
Sure. Yeah, we had an opportunity. Adam invited us to speak at a event called Dessert with the Principal back in the fall, and we had a sign-up sheet. And so we do have a core group of parents who has been involved, getting updates and giving a little bit of feedback. We hosted a breakfast. It wasn't very well attended, but we did have some feedback there. We've also, just through various channels, been put in touch with some parents who are serving as community partners. And so that is kind of just starting to ramp up a little more to the level that you're talking about. So we're hopeful that as we get to the point where we're talking about an implementation plan, that we will have community voices involved.
I think those types of experiences fall under the independent, and as we're looking at the structures that'll help support that, one of those pathways will be job shadowing or internship. And we were actually just talking about this morning when we were thinking about what if, right, you're doing that, is 6 weeks an adequate enough a time frame to not only structure your learning experience, but make that connection with someone in the community, and then get in the door and have the experience. And we're thinking probably that would have to be, if you're doing a job shadow or an internship, more than one session that you would sign up for, or double sessions, right? So it would be, instead of just a morning each week, you might do a full day so that you could really get into it more fully. Yeah. Some of these questions are also on our website. So Peter has put together a website, and on that we have all kinds of research and some of the data that you were wondering about for student engagement. That's on there. We have information going back all the way from September, from things that we've done throughout the year, really trying to document the work and the process. And there's also 2 frequently asked questions documents that have been produced from 2 different lenses. So one is a faculty frequently asked questions document that we've gotten many questions from our peers, and also from the student standpoint. We did, as Peter mentioned, worries, wonderings, and wows cards, and we went through each card and compiled the frequently asked questions from the student perspective. So I would encourage you to check out the website, and our contact information's up at the top, but our website is rolandcbu.weebly.com.
And we also have a blog on there, and the reason I mentioned that is not only do we describe some of what Abby was saying, but there's recaps of some of the school visits we went on, and that's just some really fun stuff to read about, at least we think. And you might be interested in seeing some of the things that other people are doing. 2 visits in particular that were a little farther is we were able to go to a conference in Wisconsin and visit a school out there, and we were also able to attend a really amazing conference in Philadelphia and visit some schools down there. So.
Super.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Superhuman effort.
I guess you can fly out of here now.
Thanks. Okay, we're on to 7.3, 2017-18 last student day, faculty day.
Okay, and so this is on discussion this month and for action next month. Our recommendation is that the last day of school be Friday, June 15th. That will be the 100th 177th day of school. We have 179 student days built in. We would recommend that we trade the 2 student days going into the next week into professional development days. And that would give 3 days for most of our schools, 4 days for Charlotte, because they had an additional day off. So the teachers would have 4 days in Charlotte, 3 in all of our other schools. And that time has been really well spent in the last few years when we've done this. So that's the administrator recommendation. It's for discussion for you, and then it'll be on the agenda next month, depending on the discussion, maybe on the consent agenda or as an action item.
Does anyone have any feedback or thoughts?
So you say we have 179 calendar days. We need 175. And so.
By going
we've
that.
had 4 missed days so far?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So we lost 4 and we added 2. Okay.
No more. I'm not canceling school. I don't care. We're going.
Whether they pick up any kids?
Yeah.
Whether they make it.
Any other thoughts on the last day? You know, since we're talking calendars, I'm just going to skip to 7.6. We'll come back to the other 2 and just
Okay.
talk about the 2018-19.
Okay. So
Next year's calendar.
Yep, so last month you approved the regional calendar, and that's, you know, if you look at our little chart at the front end of the agenda, that's pretty much a blessing of the board, because by statute, that regional calendar is set by the regional superintendent group on an up or down vote. You know, people don't even need to agree. If it's like, a majority of 1 is what makes the regional calendar. And that is to make sure that our calendars, especially at the high school, are coordinated with the Burlington Tech Center and the Essex Tech Center, where we send students. So the calendar that you're looking at is the regional calendar, plus I'm noticing you don't have all the nice little colors.
No, this was from.
Oh, the old one.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll notice that there are 4 additional days that are in red. Those are the days that would get us to 179, which is traditionally what we've added. So there's November 9th day, there's January 2nd,
March 4th,
and
5th.
then March 4th and 5th. That's our recommendation. Again, this is for discussion tonight. It will go on the agenda next month, either as consent or as action, depending on the conversation here. And then we add professional development days, because our teacher contracts are 189 days. So that's 179 student days, 3, remember, PRT days, and then 6 professional development days. The calendar also includes a parent-teacher conference day in October for K-8 and March for K-8, and 2 days for K-12, for 9-12, I mean, in October.
What are the red blocks again? I'm sorry.
Those are the additional days.
So we'd add
So
those back in.
We add
Yeah,
4,
okay.
we
Yep.
have more days than the state
Yeah,
requires.
okay.
So you'll change.
If you add up the professional development days, it looks like we have too many, but it's because the 18th of October would be one for the high school, because they need back-to-back days for teacher conferences, parent-teacher conferences, whereas March 22nd would be a day that the high school is in session, and the K-8s are now having parent conferences. So the reality is, each set has 7 professional development days to get us to 186.
And I will just mention, in case anyone notices, that we are have asked and have received a waiver for this current calendar on 2 of the days. The March day for K-8, and that's an easy waiver because the statute really talks about the connection with the tech center. And the October, is it 18th day? 18th day for the high school. That's a more difficult waiver, and we only get the waiver by ensuring that we transport our kids to the tech center, so that our tech center kids don't miss a day.
Any thoughts about this calendar? Next time we'll see it, it'll be on the.
So you'll change the text underneath each individual month
Yes.
to drop those days out?
Mhm.
Okay.
It pretty much mirrors this year's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going backwards.
Committees of the boards.
More committees of the board, charges and critical report.
Yeah, it's late, just 1 minute, I think, just as an overview. If you have a copy of it in front of you, I'd like to just use the Finance Committee as an example, because Lynn already talked about it, and that this is something that individual committees can do. So, for example, the last page that you'll have in your packets, 4 pages, there's a suggested timeline, there are a series of questions, so I was thinking March, April would be the time frame where each committee would be looking at their, you have a copy? Yeah. Where each committee would be looking at just the charge, the official charge from the board, the membership, and the work that's required of the board, given the charge, and just have a conversation. Is this the right structure? Is it the right membership? Is there anything that should change? Do a little reflection. What we were successful at this past year? What did we not complete that we had intended to? What are the obstacles to that? So that you could give feedback to the rest of the board, because these charges come from the full board. And so what Lynn talked about is that they did some reflection, and they talked about, for example, in the far right column, there are comments, and one of the comments was, just consider, should it be finance and budget, and then a separate committee for facilities. The committee talked about it, and they decided that they wanted to keep facilities within the finance, budget, and facilities, but perhaps when it's an individual town, that there should be some breakout for that kind of work. And Lynn, that committee will ask you to reflect again on that related to your particular committee, but then we should also be looking at each other's committees and review the charge. So I'm on HR, and I might, Kelly, you've been leading the communications. I might have some input related to the charge of the communications committee and what comes out of the communications committee back to the full board. Am I getting the report out that I need? Do I feel that charge is appropriate to what I am seeing that the whole board needs? So that there would be some reflection back and forth, and I'm hoping that we get a slot on the retreat agenda where we can be more focused about this. But meanwhile, I know I'm talking more than a minute, aren't I? Meanwhile, that there's an opportunity for individual committees to just think about the committees that you're on right now. Does it feel like it's the right charge? Do you feel like you were able to accomplish what you had set out to accomplish? Do you have recommendations for changes? And then I would just do a suggested add task, is look at the other committees. You have policy. We have an executive committee. We haven't talked a lot as a board about the role of the executive committee. It's been 5 members of the board meeting with the executive committee, and those conversations are rich. And, you know, is that the appropriate structure? Those 7 who are not there, are you missing something from that? I think we need to have a conversation about that. So that was the concept behind looking at our committee structure and the way that we govern ourselves as a board. And so immediate task over the next 2 months is conversation with your committee, think about the other committees, and then in preparation for retreat item.
Just want to say something really quick about the retreat. I'm starting to feel like we're starting to put a lot of stuff on that retreat. And I think it's going to get to a point where it becomes ineffective for us to spend a whole day spending 20 minutes on each item. So I really think we need to be careful, and maybe even as a board decide what we're going to put on that retreat. Because it's a big commitment for everybody in this room to sit there for 8 or 9 hours. And I'd like to just make sure that we utilize our time well. Sorry, that's my rant for the evening.
Not breaking news. What was it?
Bursting
news.
bursting.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
your
yeah.
bursting news. Could be breaking.
A little more positive.
It can be a negative thing. We take it all here.
I'm not trying to be negative, I'm just trying to.
Be realistic.
Constructive.
You're
Constructive.
realistic.
It was like
No, I
multiple things.
know, I
I'm like,
totally
whoa.
agree with you, and, which is why I'm hoping that we can prep
Yeah.
prior to then and have more focused discussion, and then I imagine that out of what, you know, short activity might occur. I mean, the most important thing we can do as a board is charge ourselves with appropriate tasks and appropriate, you know, the governing piece is what's so important about this board, and it's a small board. You know, there are 12 members, and we have big tasks to do. So if we can be sure that we're charging ourselves appropriately, that we're having the appropriate reporting out in a public arena, and that we're holding ourselves accountable, that's really important to me as a board member. And I agree that our agenda, every time we turn around, we keep saying, oh, put it on the agenda, put it on the agenda. And,
But I just want to
But,
underscore, Colleen,
yeah.
if I may, for the newer people that are here, you're actually on a brand-new board. So what Colleen is talking about is last year, the CVSD board, in our first board season, really was kind of in a reactionary mode, and we made our agendas or our committees based on what previous practices have been. So we really are in a developmental phase. So even though it's late at night and we have a lot to do, these are important tasks, and you'll have an important voice in these committees and what these committees are supposed to do. So I just offer that, so that is in the back of your mind too.
And when is the retreat? Just, I don't have any idea what's the
Oh.
retreat, but I wanted to keep that for the orientation. But
The first Friday in June.
June 8th. I think. I was just
June 8th,
looking.
that sounds
I think
right.
it's June
June
8th.
8th?
Yes,
Does that
yeah.
sound right?
Yes.
I wonder if we could do an activity, I'm also here, I'm being a teacher, but at some point when we get closer, all these things we keep saying, the retreat, and sort under some major categories. Like when I gave my
keeping
little
lists.
equity soapbox, really, it's about what is our budget, what are our budget priorities and
Yep.
goals? And if we're a policy board, then how does our budget reflect that? So,
Oh,
like-
just wait.
okay.
I have a list
Yeah.
too, that we can look at and determine.
It's actually, this is healthy, right? We're looking at ourselves as a board and coming up with not better ways, but different ideas and different things to look at. So it's all healthy. But I agree with you, Brendan, that we have to be really thoughtful on how we do it. And I also want to be thoughtful about the time, because I'm telling you, we're 3 hours away from midnight.
I'm not gonna make it to that meeting. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
And just reiterating Darren's point, perhaps on the next month's agenda, there's a quick brainstorm of the agenda for the retreat. That would give us a month or two to tweak it.
Okay, 7.5, budget debrief. Any feedback you'd like to give on the budget process, the budget information, budget buddies, anything with the word budget in it?
It was
The fact that
outstanding.
we passed the budget.
It passed, thank you, go on. Next.
Ditto.
Thought you guys, at the committee meeting, had some pretty good ideas, if you wanted to prime the pump.
Okay, so my piece of paper, though, keeps switching, and I'm not.
You want mine?
Yeah, that'd be great.
They just gave me 90 degrees, didn't they?
Yeah, okay, so our suggestions that we had, we thought it would be helpful, and actually this came from a budget buddy, was that at the end of the whole budget process, to have a list of all the changes that actually happened at each individual school as a result of the budget process, in the sense that, you know, Shelburne is gaining 8 teachers, and Charlotte is gaining a art program, whatever it is. At the end of the day, what exactly happened at each school, because we found when we went to our individual communities to do our budget presentations, they really wanted to know, well, what changed at our school? And it was a little harder to pull that out. We also thought it would be really helpful before we approve the final budget on that last day to actually do a recap of the budget. Just kind of one last budget presentation, not super in detail like we're going out to the communities with, but just kind of making sure that whoever shows up at that last meeting can see the kind of our process that we went through. There's an idea to maybe have I think this was Brendan's idea, to have like a budget workbook that everybody knew what they were getting with a list of reports, so that, it wasn't just random pieces of paper, that there was some type of format to it. We're going to be moving towards more year-round budgeting, and so at the retreat, one of the things that we really want to look at doing is developing the board goals for the budget. We kind of backed into it this year in October, and we want to be really intentional to develop those board goals in May. There was a question about we talk about equity and autonomy, but could we all just come to a working consensus of what equity means, so that when we talk about it as a board, when we get to that discussion? And then we specifically wanted to look at essential arts class size and interventions, I think, at the April and May board meetings as we move towards year-round. So you'll actually see those on your board agendas in April and May.
What was that last item? I'm sorry.
So in April and May, we want to look at class size, right? The EQS surrounding class size. We want to look at K versus K4, or was it K3, 5, 8? As a board, I think instead of arguing in December, should we have class sizes of 25 in kindergarten, I think we want to kind of have a sense going into the budgets. What is this board talking about? Are we okay with the EQS surrounding class size? We actually have a class size policy, so we actually would be doing policy. It would be giving feedback to the policy committee if we wanted to make changes to that. Does that?
I mean, part of the work plan is, if you're going to do year-round budgeting, you don't have these meaty discussions in December when you're trying to get all your budget done. You have the meaty discussions earlier in the year when you have time to reflect on things, and then that informs the number crunching part of the budget later. So on your work plan is actually in April and May, there are times built into this year's work plan for budget. It's really, what part of the budget did the board seem interested in spending more time on? And those were the three that came in. The committee came up, but there is room for others if.
All right, so it's not necessarily class size, it's the information we were getting back from the feedback from the community. Class size rose up as one of the concerns, and that's why we're looking at it?
No, I
or-
think it's, and I could be wrong, you could always change this, it's your board, but I think the intent was to say, if we had had a very clear understanding of class size in our heads in May, then when we got around to November, it would be kind of a no-brainer. It would be, this is when Elaine says this is the staffing I need to meet that goal, you would have said, oh yeah, we just had that discussion, I understand all those numbers. So that's what it was, not necessarily feedback from the community, but really what is the board's goal on that?
It's like defining equity. When we talk about equity in December, instead of going in every December and explaining exactly what equity is, having the board come to an agreement, so we know going into the discussion what equity is. Or essential arts, we had that whole discussion about the differences in how essential arts are delivered at all the different schools. So is that something that we're okay with, or do we want to look at
Okay, so it's
things-
digging into equity and autonomy, okay.
Yeah, I think some different pieces. But this was our finance committee, this was just some of our ideas to kind of look at. The only thing I'd add, just quickly, but we should have a more defined role and purpose for our budget buddies. So that doesn't have to be decided now, but I think that, in my opinion, they were a bit lost in the process. Well, we've got some budget buddies here. So that's just something to consider. I would love to get feedback from the budget buddies
Yes.
too.
Sure.
On how you felt you contributed, or if you could have been utilized differently, or, that'd be good.
I would like to just add one thing, I think more about communication, like how we are going to get this information into the community. For example, some of the meetings that we had here towards the end where you're presenting the budget, it seems like the people are not aware, the community, and where you have only 2 people show up. So, and I realized there were so many like flyers in our town there were so many flyers out there, but how about here? Like, how do we make sure we have more presence from the community? Because I think having like 2 people is just not enough.
Oh, yeah. No, that is definitely
Yeah.
more conversations about that.
Let's get somebody for your communications committee there.
It is the million-dollar question, though.
Right, right.
And not just here, everywhere, and whether we were merged or not.
Yeah.
You know, getting people to come to a meeting is not an easy thing.
Right. And do we consider maybe adding more budget buddies? Like, and I don't know how these budget buddies are selected, but even having a budget buddy from, if you're not a parent, from, elementary, and a budget buddy from, middle school kind of thing, and a budget buddy, like maybe three, 4 if you can. I don't know if you're open to that. We're open to that, having more representation of budget buddies, or they had to be 2, I don't know. So
There
could
were,
we,
actually, there were supposed to be 5.
Oh,
So again,
okay.
it's community participation, but I would be happy to give you like the history of how
Yeah.
we've tried to
Okay,
communicate and try to increase participation within the community, but it's an ongoing challenge.
I would like to just offer that it seemed to me this year that there were far more announcements, whether it was Front Porch Forum, whether it was in our community newspapers. I was really impressed with the amount of information that was going out this year in terms of, again and again, here are the dates of the meetings, the budget meetings, here's the website that you can go to for full information. Many, many times those announcements were coming through. I think historically, it's a really tough question trying to figure out why folks are not coming out to meetings. And Lynn and I spoke about this briefly. I was hoping that we might, at the retreat, talk about how to increase community participation at board meetings, for example. I don't know that that's going to be the best time to have that conversation, but.
Well, I know
Well,
how
for-
not
oh,
to
I
do it
just-
is you just don't follow the Shelburne town rule of getting participation in board meetings. I mean, that's how you get bad participation, but.
Have something
But it
more-
is truly, like, it's a conundrum. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like if you're doing well,
Right.
nobody really, there isn't a big clamor.
So our last meeting that you were at, right, with this gun resolution or
Yes.
nonviolence, right, the gentleman suggested we get the community. I personally invited 50 people. I know Barbara Ann, I'm sorry, I don't know.
So.
Yeah. It's,
50 people I know are parents.
So we should know that this is a teacher in our system. This is Erica Bickford, and a former student in our system.
Lots of things in the
Yeah.
district. And I will echo what you said, my husband works in Burlington School District, and there are a lot of more people at their meetings, and you, I think,
Yeah.
pinpointed why. When things are going well, less people come, so.
and that's the other thing, like, we had portions of our budget that passed 3,800 to 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And
Is that buses?
no,
Buses.
it was construction, but anyway,
Free money.
yeah.
Free money.
So, I mean, that's the unfortunate,
But it's a good point, it's a great point, we hear you.
Yeah, the Williston Town meeting, we spent over an hour on the
Whether to withdraw from the Champlain Valley Park District, like a $30,000 budget item. There were probably 15 people who spoke on the floor, and Kevin and I presented the school board, the school budget, the $75 million budget at 10 o'clock. And there were maybe 5 people left who weren't, affiliated with the town, so it was laughable. It was, Right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, that's true everywhere.
It could be down to 5 people if this meeting doesn't get.
All right, we're moving along. Any other budget
thank you.
information?
I want to rethink this director.
I did not plan this agenda. I was handed this agenda. Not-
I handed Lynn a wonderful agenda. Oh, yeah, that sounds great, let's do that.
Okay, we're at 8.0, 7:50 PM. 8.1, personnel. Do I have a motion? Unless I hear from anyone, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve all of these personnel.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 8.2, Board Resolution on School Safety. Do I have a motion to approve the board resolution? Second?
Second.
Discussion. Kelly, do you want to?
After our meeting a few weeks ago, I found out, the origins of the original document, which was Addison School Board. Their board members drafted it together. There wasn't a hidden agenda on it from an outside agency. I took the few suggestions that I got from our board. I incorporated those suggestions. I talked to our state and local reps. I have followed it up and until this morning, like if you want an update. But I adjusted the language to reflect that. So you see what the feedback that I was given.
So I would hope that this gets approved, and I would only speak that I helped to prepare a $75 million budget and received a couple of emails about it. And I have received more emails about this resolution than any other topic ever in my history of being on the board. Multiple emails, some of which people have followed up and had great conversations with Adam Bunting. So I think this is important. I think our constituents are looking to us to approve this, and I would hope that folks will.
And Dave, can I ask, so the emails you received, have those been primarily in favor?
That's an excellent point, Jeff. Sorry, they were all in. They were all in favor of approving the resolution, based on stories that they had read about Putney and Addison and other school districts approving the same resolution, a similar resolution.
Right. Sending a message, I think, is like the feedback that I got, like a cohesive message. And in my opinion, the outreach that the principals had over the past month with their own independent schools, and then Elaine's letter, which incorporated a lot of those same points, and this, it's just all a part of our larger message to the legislature. And now's the time, I think, to do it.
You might want to include the shooting that happened yesterday, too.
Yes, or a threat today at Hanover High, right? So, yeah.
You're talking about the.
There was a shooting today
Yep, in Maryland, yep.
Yeah.
And at 4 o'clock this afternoon, in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Was that a threat? Or
It's a threat.
Does anyone else have any feedback on before we vote?
No, with our process, we approve it and then you sign it for the board, or?
Yeah, I think it's.
How did the other schools do it? And then send it to all of our reps?
And then,
Email it?
yeah, we get either or. I can find out specifically how they did it. I know Jessica Bromsted's expecting something
You
to.
have to come in and sign this by hand, really make sure that we are, all of us.
I actually,
How serious
I like.
it's not just a
We have a
letter.
copy of it?
The only copy I have is the draft copy. I didn't print out a hard copy.
I think our names should be on this.
How about this, and I'm sure this is going to take some technology, but we have people that can do this. How about if I pass around a piece of paper and you all sign your names, and we'll figure out how to get it on the letter?
Perfect.
Because otherwise, you would be delaying for sure.
Yep.
As long as it's a blank white sheet.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, take a blank white piece of
We'll have
paper.
I just have this one. I have
Mark
regular
McDermott, do we
lined.
have another? Oh, lined is okay.
Lined is okay?
We're in school, we
Back
can't even get a
okay.
printer. I should have
All right,
printed a
you
hot
want me to
copy.
start?
You start.
Did you vote for it yet?
No, that's a good
Well,
point.
just in case, you can sign
All
your
right,
name
well,
without voting.
all those in favor, any other discussion?
No, thank you very much for doing this.
Yes.
You're welcome.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion moves. Can I have a motion to affirm the district treasurer's establishment of the position of the assistant treasurer and the appointment of Joan Lennis to this position? Second?
Second.
Just, the reason this is just not in the consent agenda is this is somebody who can authorize bank transactions. It's a pretty big responsibility, and I just wanted to make sure that the board knew that we were doing this. And actually, this is just affirming the decision of the treasurer, because by statute, the treasurer can make this decision, but I thought it was important you guys knew.
Treasurer is
Jed Graff.
Jed Graff.
Can you remind us of the role of the treasurer, just as part of our own education?
Sure, by statute, the treasurer signs all the checks, which we do electronically, checks and drafts. He's also supposed to invest in a prudent manner and reconcile the monthly accounts. That's by statute. It's pretty old statute, given electronics systems that we use now. His primary job is authorizing all of our banking transactions. The rest of it he delegates to my staff. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. 8.4, do I have a motion to pass the code of ethics?
That paper has to keep.
Sorry.
Did you send the code of ethics individually to each board member?
It's in the board packet.
Oops, I almost voted for, I voted for the name.
So, each year at this meeting, we ask each individual board member to read the code of ethics. It's from your own organization, the Vermont School Boards Association. Read it, sign it, and then send it back to us. So yeah, no, it's okay, but I just want to make sure that everybody gets it, reads it, signs it, and then gets it back to us. So, I don't know if we need more discussion about that right now, but it really is to make sure that everybody, as they go through that, understands what the role of the board is.
I would just say, it's not on here, we're going to talk about the board development, new member, not new member,
Board
orientation.
training.
Board training.
Yeah.
And I would just say that as long as people got that back to the central office by the next meeting, we're in good
Yes.
shape.
Yep.
But we can go into it more in depth at the board.
With the new board members.
With the new board members at
That makes sense.
that meeting.
Yep.
So I don't know that it's really an action item.
Yeah, I think it's not, probably should have been
I'm
discussion.
gonna, how do I do that? How do I untake
Well, no, it was
something
on the
off?
consent agenda. Well, that's true. So what you're saying is it shouldn't have been on the consent agenda either?
It should have.
It should have
right.
just been a discussion, maybe.
item.
Yep.
But that's okay.
Then you can
Let the
withdraw
minutes,
the motion.
let the minutes show that.
Withdraw the motion.
Withdrawing the motion. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, 9.0?
Yeah, I just, one quick little change. On the district annual meeting minutes, it said that I'm elected as clerk of the district, but I think it's Dave.
It's Dave.
Dave Conry, and I made the motion to elect Dave Conry. not-
Sandy's going to take care of that.
Thank you.
Thank you for catching that.
Nice try.
Trying to get out.
God.
I go to the bathroom for 1 minute.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a motion? Did I get the motion? Yeah. Second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next meeting dates. We have a board training next Monday. Tuesday, thank
Tuesday,
you.
March 27th at 5:30. And we are inviting other board members. We might even send you an individual email, but especially if you're a newish board member, you've just come on in the last couple of years, we certainly invite you, and we're hoping that some more senior board members will also come. It makes the conversation richer. The conversation that we had around the executive committee was also that we might consider the new board development as part of a 3-4 year cycle for all board members, so that you don't just go once to this, but that you imagine every 3 to 4 years you come back partly as a support to the new board members, but also to kind of refresh, for yourself. So,
We've made some cool new PowerPoints.
and
5:30.
at the central office for dinner.
Oh, even better.
We'll have dinner for you. We'll have it catered.
Pizza, we're just gonna brunch.
Blueberry muffins delivered?
Okay, no more blueberry muffins.
You got a
Blueberry
lot
muffins,
of
yeah.
blueberry muffins
All
that
right, next 10.0, next meeting dates, committees are April 3rd here. Our next CVSD meeting is April 17th here. Do we have a date yet for the superintendent
I
evaluation?
was going to send Sandy a note about that, I don't know. I don't have it on my calendar, let's just say that.
Do we have it on our calendar?
We don't have it on our.
Okay.
We do need to do it before May.
Okay. So we should talk about that.
Sandy will work with you to.
Lynn, the community meetings, committee meetings begin at 6?
Oh, yeah,
do
there's
they?
another time, 6,
Okay.
yes. And if you're a member of the finance committee, we feed you in our meetings.
Burn a lot of calories doing finance work. Hard.
Oh, we spend a lot of time together.
I can see what's going to happen here. The committee chairs are going to start enticing membership with
Because of
food.
those abacuses, right?
Okay.
76 million of them, it's a lot.
Do we still have, we have a need to go into
Executive session?
session?
No? Okay, all right.
Okay. Motion to adjourn. All right, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Off on these two. Thank you, everyone.